Hello and welcome to another Enemy Behind Friendly Line session, I should say. And we have my guy from Seahawks Forever back on the channel. So very happy to have him back on. He just flew in from Mobile, Alabama, and boy, are his arms tired. No, I joke. He's been there out there at the Senior Bowl doing God's good work out there, scouting out these players for us in person with his eyeballs on the scene. And we got him back here, kind enough to come right back. Just got back in on a flight, really just last night. So we know he's, probably struggling out there after a long week, but he was kind enough to come on in here. Dan Viens, back in the house from the Seahawks Forever podcast. Thank you for coming back in here, Dan. How goes it?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's going good. The one advantage to going from the east to the west is I had to be on a show at 8 o'clock this morning, which, my body thinks it's 10 o'clock now. So it really wasn't that bad. I'm usually not much of a morning person, but that worked out okay. The other downside is I left 70 and sunny behind and then landed in the snow here in Seattle. So, not the best transition, but it was a great week. Had a good time down there.
No, and if there's one place in the country too that's just not set or up for snow at all, it is pretty much the Pacific Northwest and Seattle area. If you're coming back into that too, it's just the traffic and how fast you get home was a 2-hour drive, 3-hour drive back.
It wasn't bad. I caught it just in time. It was just starting to snow, so my Uber was like no problem. The funny thing was I just missed the snow in Mobile. Like they had that big snowstorm down in the south, and they had 8 inches. Less than a week before the game. They actually were concerned about being able to get the turf painted in time, but then it all, melted away. Obviously it was 70 degrees almost the whole time I was down there, but that area was shut down for 3 days because they're just not equipped to deal with that. So thankfully it didn't happen during game week, or we might've missed out because they moved that stuff inside during the practice week. And if they do that, the media is not allowed. So we caught a break from Mother Nature down there.
Yeah. Some weird weather. We're down here. We're not getting any. I'm in San Diego. We're getting no precipitation this winter at all. Not even just some, occasional rain showers. We got like one throughout the last 3 months. It's like, oh my God.
That sounds terrible.
Yeah. It's horrible. It's just warm and just out there walking in the sun. All this. It's really bad. I'll tell you what, Dan. It's awful. Well, I know it must have been a pretty crazy experience first time going down there and just sort of taking it all in. What were just kind of from a big picture observational standpoint, things that you kind of encountered down there, going down there and doing this for the first time and sort of just taking all this in. And we all see the TV version and copies of what's happening, but there's always so much happening behind the scenes. What was kind of just a general big picture overview on, kind of your thoughts on being down there?
Yeah. Being the first time, like the first day or two was a little overwhelming, just kind of trying to figure out what to focus on. And I realized really quickly that you just can't watch them all. Like, I plan to go down there again in the future. Would probably want to team up with someone. I think it'd be a really good way to do it, where you can, each of you, your eyeballs can be in different places, but even just, shooting content for each other. And then being able at the end of the day, when you're breaking it all down and sharing your thoughts, to be able to discuss that with someone.
Yeah.
As opposed to just, the solo analysis. But that being said, it's a tremendous event. They open their arms wide open to content creators, big and small, which they're kind of sort of at the leading edge of that. There are still some big events out there that are a little tight about that. And you have to work for a major media corporation to get credentialed. So that was cool. A lot of people I'd had on the show and met virtually before I got to meet in person. And then as far as what I saw on the field, just you got a really good feeling down there for the depth of this class. Like, some of the top guys weren't there. I heard one estimate. I think it was Kyle Krabs and Joe Marino. Those guys on the draft dudes were talking about, because Kyle was there, and his estimate was there were maybe 8-ish players there that he thinks will go in the first round. Last year, the number was 10 from the Senior Bowl, but this year they had the benefit of a full off season to identify, scout, and recruit the underclassmen, because last year was the first year they were allowed, but it happened late in the process. They really weren't able to convince some of those guys that it was worth their while to come. And so, even though some of those top guys weren't there, you just saw the depth and the quality of the class spread out through a bunch of different position groups, to be honest. And I've heard as recently as, today that a lot of analysts feel like from 20-ish to about 60 or 70, the talent's really level in this class. Day 2 should be really, really strong and pretty consistent across the board. And being able to see that up close and watch individual drills, but also 7-on-7, 11-on-11. Wednesday was full padded contact. I think that bore itself out. There's a lot to choose from.
Would you say, kind of coming off this experience, then, that the narrative comes out of this upcoming draft is that it's weak? And I've tended to think that people kind of put that label onto it because of the fact that maybe it doesn't have the scintillating talent at the top that you would tend to see at these drafts, on top of the fact we don't have the number of quarterbacks that are as great to look at the top, or receivers. Right. But when you, to your point on the depth side of it, and that maybe being a bit of a thicker role than we normally get, if that makes sense, or are you kind of buying into that as well on that side of it?
I feel like the general opinion about this class seems to be improving. Going into the college season, you heard that word all the time. You heard how it was light at the top, but generally weak, with a lot of those COVID guys kind of finishing up last year and coming out, and then the NIL obviously being a factor and keeping some of those fringe guys, some day 2 guys in school. I felt like near the end of the season, when we started to see guys declare that, and I don't have hard numbers to back this up, this is just kind of my observational feel, is last year those borderline guys stayed in school. This year, a lot of those borderline guys that were, waffling between staying in school, taking some NIL money, and coming out, more of them came out. And I think that's helped elevate this class a little bit, especially with some of the underclassmen. Like, you take that Ohio State group last year, and they all decided to stay in school last year. And it paid off for him, right? But it kind of, that would have added a lot to last year's class too, and now they're in this year's class. So I do think, if you're looking for superstars and flash and guys that are going to be all pros, from the moment that they step inside the lines, you're probably not going to get much of that from this class unless you're lucky enough unless you are drafting in the top 10. But depending on fit and scheme and need, whatever your shopping list is going into this draft, for the most part, you're going to be able to find value, and you're going to be able to find guys to upgrade your roster, particularly through the first, I'd say, 4 rounds.
You mentioned you thought there was probably 8 first-rounders that are being projected out of this group you watched. Do you have a good idea, would you say, of who those 8 are, or near to a good idea of who those 8 might be?
No. And you see that even in, I recorded a show this morning where I kind of reviewed some of the national mocks that have come out since the Senior Bowl. Some of the big guys, and Matt Miller came out with a new one. Lance Zierlein did his first one. PFF came out with a new one, and there's no consensus there. Yeah. I mean, there's guys that in one mock might be going in the top 15 that are second round pick. And I don't know that I have any more clarity than that. If I went through my list and tried to name a couple of guys that I think are very, very safely placed in the first round, I think Shamar Stewart was the best player there. The first 2 days of practice is one of the reasons he checked out and decided to go home after Wednesday, that he had, made the impression he needed to make, especially in regards to like his lack of productivity on the stat sheet at Texas A&M. But even I'll give you an example. Like Green blew the week up, right? And had the most viral rep, certainly, unfortunately for Josh Connerly. But he's not everybody's flavor. And he's going to be a very specific scheme fit. The lack of length is an issue for some teams. I'm still not convinced that he's an upper first round guy. And I can see him, because of the depth of that edge class, and because so many of the other guys that he's going to be competing with for teams looking for impact from that position are bigger and longer. There's a lot of 6'5", 280, 290 guys in this draft. I could see a guy like that, like slipping down. Like right now his stock's high, and it was probably the right move for him to leave when he did. I'm not so sure that come draft day, he's not going to get pushed behind some of these other guys, just as an example.
Edge group is really, really deep too in this class. So and just as muddled as you just talked about the whole rest of the class, I think you could certainly apply that to the edge group. And it kind of feels like to me a Greenville guy will go in the first, but it'd be like a 20s to a playoff team that'll just kind of slot him into sort of a pass rush role, at least initially as he walks in, to get around some of that length and maybe not having as much weight to him as you'd maybe like coming off that edge, especially as an early down guy. but probably right on the edge. I think that he doesn't walk unless he probably has heard that, like, Hayes in the barn, you've done it. You're into at least the first. And he's like, okay, well, 28 versus 22. I don't care. If I've
we saw Mike Tomlin talking to him. So, I mean, that might be one of those situations like you talk about where they usually just sit back in the draft and just kind of cherry pick guys that slip through the cracks. And they always seem to get really good value that way. I could see that.
And they have, to your point, they've gone for somewhat undersized edges before. I mean, TJ, when he was coming out, wasn't looked as a big edge. The Highsmith kid is 6'2". He's kind of an undersized guy too. So that has been a bit of their modus operandi as far as how they behave in these drafts too on that. The one place we got to get into cover a little bit, because it's going to be hot to trot on the forefront of people's minds. And I saw Corbin Smith put Jackson Dart up in the first round. But the quarterbacks are obviously a little bit of what I'm getting asked about a lot coming out of the Senior Bowl from our chat, and the people are very much percolating on this one. Let's go just like we've done this a little bit. I got to go big picture, and let's go a little bit more micro on these guys individually a little bit if we can. Dan, thoughts on the quarterback class in general, and then who were the ones who really, through all the days of practice, not on a one given day of practice, but through all the days of practice, really did maybe separate themselves or not separate themselves from the other.
Yeah, I think the group that we got to see in Mobile only confirmed sort of the general feelings about the class as a whole. And that is that there's some guys with upside, but I thought Daniel Jeremiah said it perfectly this morning. He tweeted out that he's never seen a quarterback class that was as dependent on fit as this one might be, that the boom to bust ratio for all these guys, even the two at the top, right, is wider than normal. There's no sure things in this class. I don't even think, as much as I'm a Cam Ward guy and some people are big believers in Shedeur, I don't think either of those guys are can't miss.
Do you have a first round grade on both those two?
For those two, well, given I grade quarterbacks on a curve, right? It's given need and given supply. Yeah, they're going in the first. So they get a first round grade for me. Okay. Now, if I was doing the thing where you grade for, if it was any given year, I tend to agree with, I saw another, there was just a piece, Jeff Howe did a piece this morning about the quarterback class in The Athletic. And he quoted one executive, an AFC front office guy, as saying he thinks 90% of front office personnel would agree with this statement. And that is that none of the guys in this would have gone ahead of any of the guys that were drafted in the top 12 last year. And I agree with that. I don't think any of them are better than you could argue Bo Nix. Some people think he only went 12 because it was Sean Payton and that, it was such a fit and he liked him so much. But I tend to agree with that. And I think the perfect example of that is Jackson Dart. In any given year, he's not a first round pick. I get it, but he's very, very possibly going to go in the first round this year, simply because he has traits that you can project. He has upside that can be tantalizing. His skill set is intriguing. There are major red flags and question marks, as there are with most prospects, but there's such a need, and there isn't another guy. It's unfortunate we didn't get to see Will Howard and Quinn Ewers down there. I think that would have made that a much stronger group. And it would have really been intriguing to see those guys in that environment. But I think Dart's a perfect example of, I guess maybe the first comparison that comes to mind, not from a play style or talent standpoint, but Kenny Pickett. He wasn't a first round talent, but he ends up, 15th or 16th in that draft just because there was nobody else. And at some point you got to take shots at guys. I see a team like, we'll find out in the next couple of weeks what happens with Matthew Stafford in LA. He said he wants to come back. There seems to be, like, when you kind of read between the lines, there seems to be a little bit of hesitation for the Rams to embrace that and commit to him further. We know there's no guaranteed money left on the last 2 years of a deal. He wants to change that. Are they willing to? I could really see Jackson Dart having appeal to a Sean McVay in that system, more so if he doesn't have to play right away. But that's just one example of a team that I could see looking at him and saying, okay, I think he's worth a first round pick right now, because he's not going to be there most likely when we come around again in the second round. And I think we can work with this player. And then I would say this overall, maybe he wasn't the most consistent guy down there from day one to day three. He really struggled taking some snaps from under center. as a lot of these guys do, but he was the best. It was pretty obvious he was the most talented guy there and the best guy there.
Oh, as far as dart, I thought you were going to say maybe like, but
Yeah.
how is the arm strength with him as far as, when I watch it on tape, I see a guy that's got a little bit better than average. Some people are trying to kind of hype it though to being like, no, he's got actually like a good arm for a prospect. To me, it's in that sort of spot. He's about 6'1.5" ish. The mobility is good. I think it's closer to more of a Baker Mayfield than I think it's a Russell Wilson. Where do you stand on those kind of items with him?
That's a good comp because I think on his touchdown run in the Senior Bowl, it had a little bit of Baker to it. He had to get physical and put his shoulder down and take a hit, and he's willing to do that. I'll say this from what I saw up close, in individual drills and one-on-ones and in the team stuff. I think he has more arm strength at his disposal than you often see. Like when I've used the analogy with him of a pitcher, like he might sit 91 to 93, but if he needs to reach back and get 97, he's got it. And I actually look at that and I tend to be a little bit more optimistic, I guess. When I look at quarterbacks, I like to ask like what they can do instead of just absolutely shredding a guy for a bad game I saw or for a weakness. Like quarterbacks develop, right? None of these guys, almost none of them come out of college just ready to go without having to question whether or not they can make the transition. But I saw some instances this week where he really let it go. And I was like, and a couple of us looked at each other, was like, okay, so he has that fastball. I think it's to his credit that he doesn't always use it, right? Because we've seen the opposite of that. We've seen guys like Will Levis come out and that's all they have. They don't have an off-speed pitch.
Milton.
Yeah. Milton's another guy.
Yeah, everybody's 100 miles an hour fastball. Throw as hard as I can.
He looks now, and I don't want to pat myself on the back too hard, but like after I had made that analogy to somebody, I can't remember if it was on one of my shows or I was on somebody else's. Then I heard a couple of days ago say, and I can't remember who it was now, but on one of the bigger national shows, kind of likened him to Greg Maddux. And I think that's kind of a good comp. Like he can change shapes and speeds and arm angles and if you see him, throw a little bubble out into the flat and a guy came into his view and he can drop down, and still be accurate with that. We've seen more of these young quarterbacks are coming out sort of with that ability. But the word that pops into my mind when I think about how he looked all week, even despite some of the fumbling issues, is he just looked comfortable. Like he didn't seem overwhelmed at all by any of it. And I thought it was a good week. And I tend to think the people that nitpick any of the performance they saw from him down there this week, maybe are just trying to confirm their priors a little bit and just don't like him as a prospect and are looking for reasons. I thought he had a good week.
How about a guy that I know you said had on your videos, you're posting out a good initial day. Seemed like kind of started to go a little bit down just on the general thing I was hearing from it. Jalen Milroe. I come back to this guy now as I've gone through my evaluation with him a lot. Man, I think he took steps forward this year, but I do kind of find myself going Taysom Hill. Am I off on that, or do you think this kid really does legitimately have the ability to round out these rough edges?
I went into the week bullish on Milroe's upside, just because the traits that he has that are positive are so dynamic that it's easy to talk yourself into him being, a high upside prospect. And then seeing him all 3 days and then seeing him in the game. And, I just said, I tend to be more optimistic with these guys and look at what they can do versus what they can't. But his struggles in the short to intermediate passing game are so significant that at the beginning of the week, I tried to tell myself, okay, it's a mechanical issue that can be coached up, right? His footwork on the short to intermediate stuff is terrible. He stands straight up. It's like a smaller version. You mentioned Joe Milton. This was one of my issues with him. He's just all arm. He just kind of whips it, doesn't stride into it, doesn't have a good base. So it's real tough for him to change his platform if he gets pressure or if a guy's covered up or whatever. He'll just stand there flat-footed and just kind of whip it. And so he grounds a lot of balls in the dirt. We saw that happen a dig route in the game. The guy was wide open. He really tried to put as much on the ball as he could.
Rudimentary throw too, right? I mean, a pretty about as easy as it gets from a quarterback's perspective as far as the throw goes on that you're talking about.
Yeah, guy flashed open and he threw it in the right spot. It was just way too low. On the other end of the spectrum, he's one of the best deep ball throwers in this class. And you can see it though, what I'm talking about, where when he does that, when he makes a decision to get rid of the ball and he throws it deep, that's when the mechanics look good. Like the footwork's proper and he gets the ball out. The small hands do not show up at all in how he throws the football. In fact, on the Zebra GPS tracking stuff, he had the highest initial rotation and the highest initial speed just about every day that he was down there. So the ball gets out of his hand. It looks good. It's just the short stuff. And so you start to ask yourself, well, he's worked with Tommy Rees. He's worked with Bill O'Brien. He worked with Kalen DeBoer, like 4 years. And that's still an issue. I just don't know. It might be a blind spot for him. Right. I went into the week thinking from a Seahawks perspective, like if they took this guy on day 2 and stashed him for a couple years, that'd be pretty exciting. I came away from the week not wanting anything to do with him. Let someone else try to develop that guy because I just don't think he's a natural thrower of the football. And at the end of the day, like that's a tough obstacle to overcome.
Really is. And the natural thing is the thing I come back to too. Sometimes just guys have a thing where the ball is coming out of their hand properly, free and easy, and they just have a natural like kind of throwing motion to them. And there's other guys that are just athletes and really big and strong as hell, and they can throw it, but the ball doesn't come out. I think Lamar Jackson, for all the steps he's taken forward in his game, it's still sometimes when you watch him throw, the ball's just not kind of always coming out with a natural feel to it. So I guess we would say that with Milroe and your assessment of it, the best case scenario and looking at this guy, even walking into this evaluation process, would be that he could turn himself into a Hurts. I build up a super team. I put this guy back here, restricting his attempts. He uses his legs, throws those 9 routes because that's Hurts, right? They hit you with the running game. They bring a safety up. Then they got Brown with one-on-one on and he runs a 9 route, and Hurts can throw a good 9 route. Like he can't throw really well on the short and intermediate stuff for the most part. Same thing that you talked about is like there's pressure. There's no off-platform throw. He's got to have his feet sunk into the dirt. He's got to be able to be clean to get it off. But from what you're saying, I don't think you're even feeling like there's even really a Hurts kind of upside to this kid and what he really is going to bring, because it is just much worse on that short and intermediate stuff.
Yeah, Hurts was so much farther ahead when he came to the Senior Bowl as a passer, even though even that being said, though, there were questions about that part of his game, right? I came into this week thinking along with a lot of other people, I wasn't the first one to think of it, that Hurts was an appropriate comp for him. I came out of it thinking more Anthony Richardson, Malik Willis, like where you can get tantalized because of the athletic upside and his ability to run the football and what a weapon that can be. But just the struggles to be surgical in the passing game are maybe too much to overcome. And he's going to blow up the combine. He's going to blow teams away in the interview process. We got to see him at the opening press conference. He and Dylan Gabriel were the 2 players that came out and spoke with Jim Nagy. He's really, really impressive as a human being, as a leader, 2-time captain at Alabama, all of those things, which only means at the end of the day, he's probably going to be overdrafted.
I would probably say, I think too, the Jalen Hurts, this is the thing where how Russell Wilson created so many guys that got picked so much higher than they probably would have years after that because of what he was able to do. I think the same thing here was Jalen Hurts to a lesser degree, where some team will probably think, hey, we know there's restrictions to what he can do, but we'll just build this thing around him. We'll take that Eagles model. It's worked so well for them. And that probably then, to your point, gets him drafted. Can Dylan Gabriel be a left-handed Brock Purdy?
Nope. No.
Oh my goodness.
I was open-minded to the idea of Dylan Gabriel coming into the week.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if I can put my finger on like why Russell Wilson was able to be so much closer to being ready coming out of college as he was than Dylan Gabriel. Maybe it's the arm length and the hand size that just gave Russ such an advantage. Again, to use a baseball analogy, it's a high effort delivery. Like there are times where he uncorks it and it looks natural and it comes out of his hand well, 20, 25 yard range. And you're like, okay, he's got enough zip on the ball. But there's other times where it's like he has to not necessarily wind up, but it's not snappy, right?
Yeah.
And just where I really saw the limitations on his physical stature was in the red zone stuff that they did Thursday. That was like a big emphasis of practice when the field shrinks and it's hard. What has he lived off of at both Oklahoma and Oregon, right? Guys being schemed wide open. And he is incredibly accurate. When he has time to throw the football, he's very, very accurate. And you can think to yourself, okay, I can work with this. But he can't create things on his own. Like if things break down around him, I don't think he's dynamic athletically as much. And maybe that's the separator between he and Russ. Like Russ was such an explosive athlete with his feet early in his career. I wouldn't put Gabriel in that category. I want to like him so much. He's another guy that's really impressive, in person. He's going to do well in the interviews. He's going to get drafted. I think he's a draftable player. I think he's a day 3 guy. And I suppose you use Purdy as the comp, and maybe I was a little quick to poo-poo that. If he goes to a team that is built to win, again, I'll use the Rams as an example, right?
Yeah.
And he had to play a guy like Sean McVay with a good offensive line, weapons around him. He could probably make that work. But as a full-time starter in the league, I don't see it. He'll play in the league for a long time. I just don't think he's a starter.
Well, I think you mentioned 2 specific things too to his skill set that would not be as comparable than to Brock too, because Brock has the quick delivery. So if it's more of that, and then he's got that 10-yard split that was like a 1-5-3 or something, like running back, like 10-yard split. You mentioned explosiveness with Russ. Russ had the similar thing coming out. So if he's missing those 2 capabilities, that does remove some of that, because he already has some of the size that's going to be down a bit on him as it is on that. You got to work around. So it's probably pretty fair to take that as the ultimate outlook on that one. A couple just donations I want to get through here so we don't get too far behind. This is a good question for you that's off Senior Bowl, but I'm going to be doing a show later on today in regards to this very subject. Thanks for the $5 donation, Mark. He says, Myles Garrett is demanding a trade.
Mm-hmm.
Thoughts on destinations and cost?
Wow. Where do you start? I mean, cost is going to be significant, right? How many years are left on his deal?
He's got about 3 years, I think, on the deal left. If I want to say so. It's and of course they're going to need the bonus. Go ahead. Sorry.
Is he 30 yet?
He's 29.
He's coming off a season in which he's said, and I don't know if this has been done yet, that both of his feet were an issue. He's going to have. I think he said he was going to have surgery on both feet, didn't he? This offseason. He played through it to his credit. Had one of his best years. I mean, he's in his prime. He's a Hall of Famer. He's going to cost you at least a 1+, right?
Yes, he's got a kinky contract, Dan. Holy crap.
A lot of void years.
A lot of void years. Okay. From 25 to 30, there's $42 million in void years.
Oof.
$42 million in from that deal. Now, the upshot is that initially, like next year, he's going to carry a cap cost of like $10 million. The year after that, $9 million. The year after that, $12 million. So this is a weird deal in the respect of you're getting really, really low initial costs that you got to pay for later down the line with it, with those voidable years that exist. But you are right about the injuries. The 3 major trades that have happened prior to this, of course, have been the Miles, not the Miles, but the Khalil Mack that went for a couple first, though they got a 2nd round pick back in return on that deal, though they had to give up a 3rd round pick. Frank Clark, 1st and a 2nd. And then we had the Bradley Chubb 1st round pick to the Dolphins, which hasn't worked out particularly well. But all 3 of those deals were younger players than the 29 years old of Miles. We haven't had really a recent trade here in history with a guy at this age coming off the edge. I think it's got to be probably about the void year stuff, part of it makes it a little tough for them to get 2 1st round picks from Cleveland standpoint. I think with the injury, 1st and a 3rd, it's probably what it costs. Yeah,
I do think teams seem like they're less willing now to give up multiple first round picks in trades. But it's, how do you think it fits into this draft though? We talked about how edge is a deep class in this draft. And so if you're a team drafting in the middle of the 1st round, let's say, and you're thinking about Myles Garrett, you might look at it and say, yeah, but I can draft a Shamar Stewart or a Nick Scorton, right? Or a Mike Green. Like, they're not Myles Garrett. I get it, but they're all cheap on a rookie contract and you don't have to give up additional capital for him. I mean, I think it's it's important to note that the Browns have already reacted to this and said they're not even going to have conversations with people. But as I said earlier today, I think he holds all the cards. Like, he can probably afford to sit out if he wanted to, if he's taking good enough care of his money, right? And
the Browns are gonna say that to keep the trade value. Like, they come out and they say we are moving him. The first thing the trade value does is it goes into the garbage. So you're gonna say no, but I agree with you that he holds the cards. And again, from the Cleveland standpoint, you're not winning next year.
No, it actually makes sense for them to move.
He's popped his Achilles again in the rehab process. He just blew it out. Not that they were counting on him, but like, how do you look at that team and think they got any chance to compete? And if they don't, here's your one asset you can move off to start turning this thing around. So like, they haven't made their piece to it, but they'll come around, I think, in making their piece to it.
I do think, given that he's making this known now, and exactly as you point out, where the Browns currently sit, I think he does get moved. Don't you?
Yeah. 100% I do. I think that it's because I just don't think why would they hold their feet to the fire when they know they're not going to be anything, not in that division next year. And so again, you get first and third, you can start to twist this off. If you want to reach up and take if it was us, for instance, that flipped and it was 18, you can get your Dax and Dart now. You've got your insurance policy for Deshaun in place, and you can still run the whole rest of your draft the normal way you've run it and start to, plan this thing into the future, forward on it. So I do think it happens. I like the edges in this class. That I will say, though, you talked about the guys, and that there's not a lot, Abdul Carter's your real one blue chipper. I think that there's an argument to be made about all the rest of them. And I've got about 12 guys from the first to the second round off the edge that will go in my board. But I don't know that there are, like you said, the difference of talent. I do think they've got some upside that could get to where Garrett is, but it is more of that. There's a bit of a hope rather than certainty on that, on a lot of these guys with it. And the math you're doing, like Micah Williams coming out of Georgia, it's like, well, it's really good, but you're like, there's development that needs to come along to get there. Shamar, even more development used with the hands and pass, what do you think?
Now I have a cool destination in mind. What comes to mind for you?
I feel like Detroit.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. They've got cap space. And don't you think they have to feel like, because if you're making a move for Myles Garrett, you have to feel like that's the guy that puts you over the top, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're a rebuilding team. The Carolina Panthers aren't going to probably, you know what I mean? It's going to be a team that thinks that they're close and they need that one more piece. And I think that's Detroit, right? I think this felt like last year was going to be their year. They fell short, and now the coaching staff's getting absolutely raided. They've got, I think they can afford to give up the assets. They've got the cap space to fit him in. And you think about the prospect of teaming him as a bookend with Aiden Hutchinson, and that makes a ton of sense.
I thought they should have made a huge run of Max Crosby last trade deadline. I thought that they should have done this kind of trade at that point. And so I think it certainly is overdue now, especially you don't know with Aiden Hutchinson if he's going to come back off that really crazy injury he had at the same place. That's not one where it's like, oh, he's bouncing back. He'll be 100% next year, no doubt. So probably Detroit. If Seattle was able to get the deal done with a first and a third, where Detroit goes, look, we like the first and third Detroit, but you're offering us a higher. Would you be willing to make the move? Or let's say it's a first and Derek Hall.
It's a compelling argument because we're all assuming Draymond Jones isn't on this roster, right?
Yes, he'll be gone, no doubt.
And so you essentially, and they're still over the cap, but there's other levers they can pull. I'm not worried about their cap situation, but when you start to talk about like salary wise, you could essentially swap in Myles Garrett at that cap hit that you're talking about.
Yeah.
And then worry about the void years later, right? It's not a bad problem to have. Boy, I'll tell you, I've become more risk averse when it comes to big swings like this because of the misses that we've had in the last 10 years. So when I'm sketching out an off-season plan, I would shy away from it. But as a fan, if news broke tomorrow that the Seahawks had acquired Myles Garrett and gave up the 18th pick and Derek Hall to do it, you don't think I'd be running around this place, screaming? Yeah, that'd be pretty impactful.
And I think you make good points on this. There's nothing against the fact that it hasn't worked great in our favor recently in doing some of this stuff, but some of it didn't work recently in our favor because of use and ignoring things that were blatant issues, like with Percy. You knew that there were problems with him in the locker room coming out of Minnesota. You walked into that, and you don't have those same questions with Myles. You're going to use him correctly. He's not got the background stuff. To me, you're not going to get a better player at 18 than Myles Garrett. as much as I like Derek Hall, I think he still has some big time issues as far as a run defender tackling goes. And I don't know if those are going to necessarily come forward in the future. I think we've got two good edges right now, but I don't know if those two good edges are good enough. I think having a difference maker off the edge and a guy like Garrett versus having a real good solid guy in Mafe and then a real difference maker off the other edge ultimately makes your defense better. And if it makes the defense better, then I'm with it. I mean, Reggie White went to the Green Bay Packers when he was 32 years old.
Yeah. You and I, and John Schneider was probably around Green Bay back in those days, wasn't he? As a kid.
Ding. Yeah.
It's you and I talked at the beginning of the season about lack of blue chip players on this roster, and as much as there are a lot of really nice young players on this roster, I don't think I feel any differently about any of the guys taking a step forward into that realm, and you got to have a couple of those if you have eyes on a championship, and that's certainly a way to get one.
Can you just imagine, like, with the simulated fronts and what they allow, Dan, as far as the single blocking to go along that defensive line? Because these offensive pass protections always change. It seems like the second they get that stack front, it's like, they're aligning it out. So the double team goes out the window, and you give this guy like Garrett that kind of system and scheme now to where you can draw a lot of single blocks for him because of just running those simulated fronts, not even blitzes, just the simulated pressures. I think it'd be a good fit on that front too. So.
How much it would free up Byron Murphy and, putting Leonard Williams and Garrett on the same side at times,
You're going to double. Yeah. You ain't going to get no doubles to Leonard at that point either. It's like, there's another guy that's not getting, he does like, where are you drawing the double team? Who are you picking, on that? And I agree. I think it has some cascading benefits to it.
I would set aside my risk averseness.
Let's go. I talked you into it, man. Let's go.
Risk aversion. Yep.
Feed me more Seahawks. Thanks for the $2 donation. He says, thoughts on the Luka trade in NFL terms?
Oh, geez. I'll let you take this one. I'm not an NBA guy. I was, in Dallas on a layover yesterday. And so obviously it was all over the TVs down there. And I'm not an NBA guy, but even though I'm not anymore, even I looked at that and went, what the hell are they doing? So as far as coming up with an NFL comp, I know that's been kind of a fun trend on Twitter the last couple of days, with guys like Adam Schefter taking shots at it. I bow out of this one. I'm not qualified to make a guess on that.
The NFL is not one where they give value up for nothing, where they just let these kind of trades where guys get fleeced through. Like, teams get taken in trades, but not on the opening, like where it's just blatantly awful, like this one would look to the Dallas team and reflect. It's kind of amazing with the Lakers, how many players they seem to pull in through the years, through these kind of trades where the team on the other end is just losing the deal. Kobe Bryant, the Charlotte Hornets lost that deal completely by just flipping him just for the hell of it, I guess. Just for the hell of it. Shaquille O'Neal, gets over there. They make these kind of, whether it's a LeBron or you get a Luka coming over there. I'm not saying something's, being juiced up here, Dan, but it is a little bit wild how they always seem to get the benefits of these trades that make no sense for the other teams, but make complete sense for them where it's a no-brainer. Maybe Luka's just super fat and out of shape now.
Maybe it's just an LA thing, right? The Rams built their Super Bowl team.
Well, there you go.
Trading all their first-round picks. They didn't care about draft assets at all. The Lakers in my entire lifetime have never not my the Showtime Lakers were built through the draft, but ever since then, the last 20 years, it's like that's the only way that they acquire players. They go after the superstars and they hunt and peck that way. It's pretty fascinating. I guess the first thing that popped into mind, maybe that was anywhere close, was I remember thinking the Stafford Goff trade was really weird, and it took me some time to step back and try to look at it from like, what are the Rams trying to accomplish here? I could kind of see that, but the Lions, we all thought they were just, it was to get the draft assets, right? To include Goff in the deal, and that he really wouldn't have a future there. And, certainly that was wrong, but when was the last time a trade got the entire nation buzzing the way that it is? Like all the reaction videos.
Oh yeah. No, I don't think that's what I say. I don't think there's anything like that in the NFL, because even on the ones that are like kind of somewhat lopsided, the team on the other side is like, well, we gave up a lot, but we got this thing that's really kind of what we needed. So that one was just, to me, completely, and some of it's extra. Luka's like completely out of shape, and maybe he loves himself a little bit too much beer, and you're hearing these rumors coming out with him. So, but it is a wild trade, man. It blew me away on that. So,
well, and it came out of nowhere. Like, there was no buzz, there was no smoke. It happened in the
that's the other
night. Yeah.
That's the other thing what tickles my conspiracy thing on this. Like, no other team, a lot of these teams weren't even aware of the fact he was available on the market. And Lakers just come in here and get this like pittance of an offer where why wouldn't Dallas be out there shopping? And why wouldn't you try to maximize out the returns you could get? Why would you just kind of like, hey, get Rob Pelinka up on the line there with LA. Let's just get this deal done with them. Let's negotiate with just one team. It seems a little bit suspect to me.
The last time a story like this broke in the NBA where something happened behind the scenes that nobody saw coming, it was us losing the Sonics when Clay Bennett bought him. So maybe I'm a little bitter.
Oh, I am better. I don't watch NBA to this day. I'm vaguely aware of what's going on, but I still to this day after you went through it like I did for our, upbringing too, where it's like they're trying to do nothing but tear our franchises from us constantly and pull them from here to there. And that's after losing the Pilots. That's after before we even around, they were ripping and torn from us. It's like, can you guys just take your fingers off of our sports franchises, please? Right. Get your dirty, grubby little Southern hands off of it.
Yeah.
You freaking
there's a special place in hell for
it is
for Jeff Smolian and
Ken
Behring. Yeah.
And Clay Bennett. They can burn in hell.
Absolutely.
PGZ, thank you for the $2 donation. Says B-Dog and D-Dog, my two favorite Hawk bloggers.
Nice. Thanks
for that, PGZ. I appreciate you for that, man. Feed Me More Seahawks has been celebrating 12 months on my side as a member. Says Goodell just spoke on the rumors, refs helping the Chiefs. It's a ridiculous theory for anybody taking it seriously. What's your thoughts on the Bills game?
It's hard to ignore when game after game after game, the calls, significant, impactful calls seem to go against whoever the Chiefs are playing. Like that's hard to ignore, right? Like I'm a believer that good teams make their own luck, but it's so extreme when it comes to them. I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I could see the appeal. I just try to ask myself, what's the motivation for the league in trying to prop up the Chiefs? Is it just the Taylor Swift angle? Is it the fact they think they'll get, higher television ratings because she's involved in the whole Travis Kelce thing and all of that? I don't know. Were the ratings consistently good when the Patriots were winning their 5th and 6th Super Bowls? Like, are dynasties good or bad for business? Right? Like that's the question I would ask, and I don't have that answer today.
That's where they'll say yes. The answer on that one is uniformly that it helps at least by the way the sports franchises look at themselves on this. It may not be the reality and truth on, a lot of this. Some of this is like tripping over nickels to save pennies to me, where it's like, well, worldwide audience, Taylor Swift. We're becoming more worldwide in our scope. So people kind of here domestically that might have a smattering of people that have problems with this. Well, the offsuit is that we've got all this that we gain versus what we might, lose as far as eyeballs for people seeing it, clearly in that way. And so to me, there is a bit of a motive there. I am a bit of a conspiracy guy. I will say, Dan, when it comes to football, I don't like to be that way. It's something I don't tend to go this direction, but you can't piss on my leg and tell me it's raining. And if I'm watching these games over and over again and I'm seeing what I'm watching, and you mentioned it, like it comes to a point where it's like, look, we're seeing what we're seeing. You've watched enough football when you know when something's rotten in Denmark, and something's real rotten in Denmark. Here and ate the cheese. And I think what Bill Burr probably said it right on a Rich Eisen show recently. Like, okay, maybe if since fix gets everybody so triggered, let's just call it massaged. Massaged. You know what I mean?
That's a tricky term to be using in regards to the NFL right now. I'd be careful with that one. But I will say this: I do think it's also a symptom of a bigger problem, which is I think just officiating across the board in the NFL is just not what it should be. With everything that's riding on these games, we just consistently every single week there's calls that are missed. The missed face mask calls were impactful in numerous games this year, and the fact it's not reviewable is just beyond my scope of understanding. And that's something that's been going on for years, all the way back to the New Orleans Saints will tell you about that, right? Oh, yeah. And that needs to be fixed and addressed somehow. And I don't know as much money as that league makes, why they can't just have the officials be full-time, right? Not that I don't know if that would fix everything, but something's not being managed properly there because it's such an important part of the game. The other part of it is I wonder if the tide might finally be turning a little bit, because as I watched that last game, I'm not thinking of the AFC Championship game. I'm thinking of the divisional game. Where do you remember the flop that
the Texans, the two
that Mahomes tried to pull off? Not only did they not throw a flag on it, but Aikman, that whole game was just over it. Right. Yeah. And he was kind of harping on that point the whole game, that like these guys get all these calls. This is a travesty. Like he was tired of it. And maybe if there's just a little bit more momentum in that way, it'll turn the other way. But
well, take from Troy's standpoint,
no accountability for these refs either. So they don't have to change what they're doing.
Well, that's the thing. When a guy like Troy Aikman saying it, it's a good point on your part. When he's saying that, Dan, well, why is it he's so bitter? Is he bitter just because he's just a bitter ex-player that's watching it? No, let's go deeper on this. That man had to retire because he got his brains bashed in. Mm-hmm. Because he didn't get the benefit of a call where he slides down, the two defenders lock helmets, and then there's somehow a 15-yard penalty on them despite he doesn't get touched. Yeah. He got the opposite end of that. He got bashed and broken and nobody protected him. And he won multiple Super Bowls. Yep. He wasn't some loser. He's got had a dynasty and he didn't get the benefit. So he's watching this on his side. He's like, wait, hold on. I don't matter. This guy is getting treated with kid gloves, and yet I'm just, and I would be in the same position as him. So I think it's telling when you have a guy like that vocal on the literal telecast, not on Twitter after, not on literally on the telecast, telling you in the moment, like, this is not right. Something's really wrong here.
Yeah, from a pure football fandom standpoint, I would like to see the quarterbacks just treated as football players again.
Me too.
You know, and it kind of leads to just this whole shines a spotlight on this whole systemic issue of acquiring, drafting, and developing quarterbacks in the league. Like if you have an elite guy and he's not babied anymore and he gets hurt, okay, well then it's on you as an organization to make sure you have another guy that's capable of stepping in that you can win with. And that's right. That's not there at all anymore. These guys don't even get a chance to get reps during the week. So, it's just a tip of the iceberg, I think, on a bigger problem. But yeah, it's the backlash feels like it's growing among the fans to the point that it's much more vocal than it has been.
Hopefully you're right. Maybe we've reached that point where it's going to start to move a little bit.
PG,
we'll see. Maybe not. The money's coming in. They're printing cash right now. Yeah. I mean, they might just be like, yeah. You guys are all mad. What do you guys think, Uruguay? How's it going over there in China? Okay.
Yeah.
PGZ with another $2 donation. Thank you, PGZ. Says first round we'll go with offensive line. Second round dart. Third offensive line wide receiver. I'm consistent. You like that approach coming off the Senior Bowl here? Going O dart O or O dart WR?
If that's the way it ends up, okay. But I've been consistent on this for years. That's not the way I approach a draft. I don't ever go into a draft thinking I need to address this position first, and then this one, then this one, then this one. If you're in that position when the draft rolls around, you haven't done a very good job throughout the offseason, in my opinion, to fill holes and to hedge yourself against the draft. I think that's where reaches happen. And we've seen the Seahawks do that. How many years when the defensive line was kind of as the offensive line is now, where they just every year they were chasing bodies there, right? Especially after they decided to move on from Frank Clark because they didn't want to pay him. And then that led to the LJ Collier year because they got too cute and they went into it knowing they had to have an edge rusher, but trying to acquire extra draft capital, and they kept trading down. And so instead of Rashawn Gary, and there were a couple other guys in that draft, I think Josh Sweat, I think that was that year, they end up with LJ Collier. I think that's where you get into trouble. I think the reason that we all seem to like the last 3 drafts better is they haven't done that. They've let the draft come to them, and they've taken the best player that fits their roster on the board at the time. And so I get it. I'll say this. 2 points on this. If the Seahawks, I'm not saying they won't draft an offensive lineman with their first pick. I'm of the opinion that it's going to be addressed in a significant enough manner before then that we're not going to feel the desperate need on draft day to have to do that. If they do, I think there's some really that range, 18 to the end of the first round, take your pick. Like they can do pretty well there if that's their focus. So I wouldn't be mad about it. And then when it comes to Dart in the second, maybe at the end of the day, after the whole process, that's kind of where he fits. And I've said this, I think if the Seahawks through the process end up believing that they have conviction about a certain prospect, be it Dart, Will Howard, Kyle McCord, I think those are kind of the 3 Although I place Quinn Ewers in another category for a certain reason that we can talk about if you want to. I think if they have conviction about a guy like that, like he did with Russ, not saying they think he'll be as good as Russ, but just he had conviction. He wanted to come out of the draft with Russell Wilson that year. If he feels the same way about one of these guys, we're going to either see it early or not at all.
Yeah.
Like
and
they're either going to attack it, maybe even move up in the second round if they have to get the guy that they want, or they're going to ignore it again because it looks like, first of all, they're going to have a couple of guys in place. I think on the roster, there might not even be a spot for a young quarterback. But also, next year and the year after seem like they're going to be a little better at the top. So,
yeah, I agree with everything you said on that. I don't have any difference on it. I think generally you could see the value of the board going this way with it and how it plays out. And with Dart, I have a harder time seeing him having the good Senior Bowl performance lasting through the trenches of the third round to getting to us at 18, 19, where we're picking in the third on that point. He's gone at that point, somewhere in the top third. So you're probably going to have to go up into the 2 to get him if that is where you want to go. Feed Me More Seahawks. Thank you for the $2 donation. Looks like Carroll might be starting to learn his ways here a little bit. I do believe I'm blown away here, but says thoughts on the Chip Kelly to the Raiders for $6 million a year.
I am so happy to see Pete get this opportunity. I think it's the perfect spot for him right now. I really do. I think it's the smartest thing the Raiders have done in a long time. I suppose there are some other organizations that have churned through inexperienced.
No, you're right. This is from a Raiders perspective. Yeah. What is the smartest thing they've done from a head coaching hire going back to, and
they've tried everything. They've tried
Flores.
They've tried going for the big swing with Gruden, $100 million. They've tried the internal promotion. They've tried, the interim guy.
The Lane Kiffith, prodigy. They tried the prodigy with we'll bring the Sean McVay in. And that was they Sean McVay bbefore Sean McVay.
And they've gotten them all wrong. Like was it Rick? Who was the special teams guy that was the interim coach a few years ago that Rick Scarnetti, which everybody loved him and felt like they should have given him the job. They didn't. But then they do to Antonio Pierce, and then that's a disaster. So I think it's great for Pete. I will say this. I said when he was hired that I thought the key for him succeeding in this final chapter of his NFL coaching career would be, is he willing to take a step back and be more of a CEO type head coach and let his assistants coach, and especially on defense. And the fact that he hired Patrick Graham to stay there, presumably to call plays and run that defense, which Pete's let his guys do in the past, but he's been heavy-handed with it.
Yeah.
And then on offense to go, because up until this point, the leader in the clubhouse was Darrell Bevell. He was going to get the band back together.
Yeah.
I thought that would have been the easy, comfortable move for him. Going with Chip Kelly, I think is kind of cutting edge and aggressive. And I really, really like it. I think anyone who thinks, well, it didn't work with the Eagles, I think Chip Kelly's I think he has one of the biggest brains out there. And I think he's probably a different guy as a play caller now than he was 8 years ago. And I think that could really work. I'm excited to see it.
I'm 100% in agreement. I think the Graham and Kelly both served to be that 2 points where that was going to tell you a lot about the direction Carroll was going to go. And was he going to put his fingers in the pies, or was he going to stand back? And because I agree with you, I think he can find success. Is the whole thing I thought about Carroll here when he was like, you're still not a bad coach. You can be a really good coach still. It's just, you got to know where you're good and know where you're bad. Know what your limitations are. Know what, this is where I go into Troubletown. If I go down this road, don't go down that road, Pete. Stay down on the highway, stay on the freeway, man. And so I like that he's taken more of these bigger swings outside the box. Chip Kelly spread system. That's the antithesis of something that he's run here in Seattle before. And then Graham as well. I don't think Graham was a coach under him at any time. As a guy that had gone in-house on his last, 3-4 defensive coordinator hires were all in-house. So he seems to be maybe learning on this. And if he does this, I think this gives him a real opportunity here, Dan, to have a final chapter in his career that can be really successful. It's going to be hard as hell in that division, in that conference.
Well, when you start thinking about like how quickly they could be good down there, I know Pete said all the right things as first press conference said, my timeline in Seattle was 2 to 3 years. That's about how long it took. I expect the same thing here, but he inherits Christian Wilkins and Max Crosby. Like that's not a bad place to start up front, right? He inherits. I don't think there's any coincidence that he came back in a year that's being called one of the best running back classes in decades, like 30-ish draftable running backs.
Come on, Genty.
Whatever.
Genty. Genty's going 6.
I could see it, but but also like, why not wait? And you can get Henderson or Judkins in the second, or Amari and Hampton. Like, those are even guys. And then all the guys that were at the Senior Bowl, shoot, you can get a guy in the second or third round, right? I think that's appealing to them. They have the 6th pick. They have cap space. And I think at the end of the day, if I had to put money on it, I think Sam Darnold is the starting quarterback of the Raiders week 1.
Agreed.
And that gives you a chance right off the bat. It's a tough division. It's tough, but it's going to be must-see TV.
I think where they're picking at 6 is right where you lose the blue chippers off the board, where there's not the guy that's like a Hunter. We'll see if there's even a Will Johnson guy, or, one of these very rare blue chip guys that are in the draft. Obviously, at that point, Abdul Carter's gone off the board for them. And you have Genty there, an iteration of a guy that looks certain things about him. He's a different back from Marshawn. There's going to be enough, I think, echoes of Marshawn in this guy's game, to just the dynamicism that he brings to play. And I think Carroll's jumping with 2 feet on that one. I really, really do. With
everyone, the trend right now, the last week or so, is that Shedeur Sanders gets to 6. I think Darnold makes more sense. I think, going back to 2021, there were all the reports that that's the guy Carroll wanted to pursue if they traded Russ at that time.
Exactly.
And coming off the year that he is, they can fit the salary. They can make it all work. I think that makes more sense. And potentially, if you're right, if a Mason Graham isn't even there at 6 to add to that group up front or whatever, I think it makes a lot of sense to maybe leverage that pick then. If Sanders is still on the board, then use that to your advantage, move back, still be able to get the franchise running back.
Yeah.
Add some other assets to help with the rebuild. Yeah. That could be where the draft really starts, kind of at 6.
It definitely can. It's going to kind of ignite things in if they grab there, because then you're going, okay, the alignment's probably a little bit more easier to kind of predict going into the future of the next 10 picks, as we're trying to figure out what's happening at 18 at that point. But before you went with a quarterback here, before you landed on a Russ, before you got your quarterback future, you went with Marshawn Lynch. And USC teams always had the running backs there. It's in a lot of ways, I just have a bit of a wonder on this. If with Carroll, a lot of coaches, it starts with my quarterback. With him, I kind of wonder there's times where he says, well, no, it's going to start with the dynamic running back that the team's defense has got to, first round pick to Rashad Penny through the years, and Chris Carson getting the money he got. And always that was at a bit of the head of the stack offensively, even over offensive line at times.
Yeah.
Martin Lawrence on your side with a $5 donation says, are there NFL starter level guards in this class that the Seahawks will be in position to draft, or maybe a center? We need at least one of those. IMO.
There's a lot of,
it's a lot of tackle to guard converts in this class, even at the Senior Bowl, right?
Yeah. And unlike some other years, we always hear about the tackles that are being projected inside, usually out of necessity, because they just don't have the length. But there's some guys here in this class that can that project both ways. And I think for where the Seahawks are at, taking one of those guys would make a lot of sense. If Abe Lucas doesn't stay healthy, or they don't want to extend him at the end of this deal, having a guy in-house that might be able to project to move outside. If Mike Jarrell doesn't develop, that would be pretty cool. But even on the interior, a lot of guard center / types in this draft. And a lot of them were at the Senior Bowl. I'm a big fan of Clay Webb out of Jacksonville State. Elite pass protector who's also a mauler in the run game, was a high level recruit that went to Georgia and then decided to transfer. And the step up in competition this week was nothing for him. And he can play center and guard. He's a guy that could start as a rookie. As far as just centers go, I thought as the week went on, I was more and more impressed with Jonah Monheim out of USC. And think he would fit in a Kubiak system. Marcus Bowe is really appealing to me. Now he's stuck mostly at tackle during the week. I thought he was a guy at just 6'4" and 305 that would cross train quite a bit. So maybe scouts asked for them to leave him at tackle. That happens a lot down there. Yeah. But he's a guy that's really physical with his hands. Like, if you get your momentum going one way, he has this haymaker in his back pocket that he'll just club you from behind and let you keep going where you're going. Real physical guy that can get out and move in a wide zone scheme. And some people think his best position might be center or guard. Jonas Savaiinaea, I thought, struggled with speed a little bit at tackle during the week, and slid inside to guard, looked much better. Wyatt Millam, I hate his footwork at tackle. He looked much better as a guard. So there's a lot of depth there, which is why I'm typically not taking one when I mock these guys in the first round, unless a Kelvin Banks falls to 18. There might be a guy that's just sitting there you cannot pass on. But day 2 and even into the 4th round, like there's some value. Even Jackson Slater is the guy from Sacramento State that I know that it was reported a couple of days ago the Seahawks have met with twice, which this early in the process is really interesting. He's not a guy I don't think that's going to blow up the combine, but 4-year starter and really looked the part at both guard and center at the Senior Bowl. So there's a lot of depth there. If that's your biggest concern as a fan, and it should be, like they're going to add one of those players.
So with Milliam, because that was the one where I had Milliam, I have a hard time doing looking at guys on tape and tackle and being able to really ascertain whether or not they could play to guard. Because it's such a different territory. And the thing with Milliam that did stand out, and look, he's got some people to talk about him as a guy that, well, maybe he could be like a Zach Martin type of guard. And I just see like he seems to play so high out at tackle at West Virginia. And then you go, well, how's he going to win inside on a leverage war situation when you kick him in there? But from your eyes, it seemed like that he was able to take to that transition in that way.
Yeah, especially day 3 by Thursday, I thought he looked really comfortable. It was almost as if, unless I'm forgetting some reps, like they kind of gave up on him. He played tackle Tuesday and a little bit of both. By Thursday, he was playing strictly guard, and I think he only played guard in the game. I haven't watched the full game replay yet to compare it to just what I saw live in the press box. My comp for him as a tackle is Jermaine Ifedi, which if it makes you cringe as a Seahawks fan, it should. And that comes from, I think he watched too much tape of Ifedi and would backpedal into his pass sets, which just makes me nauseous. But inside he seemed more natural. He is very, very strong from what I saw this week. And he just looked a lot more natural there. I don't see him playing tackle at the next level at all, to be honest.
No, I don't either. And look, if Eddie might have been a different player if they'd kicked him in day 1 to guard. That's the other thing with him, is that he might have had a decent career if you just set him there, let him develop from there. Yeah. He eventually got transitioned there late in his career, but it was kind of like too late, I think, at that point to make that kind of transition. So Zabel was the guy, along with a couple of others like Connerly, got offensive lineman of the week, but Zabel seemed like he went like 3 days before losing even a rep at Senior Bowl, right? Yep. And center was where they had him mainly at. Didn't
lose a rep until Thursday. No, he played more center, excuse me, early in the week, played strictly guard Thursday and in the game. He's one of the few guys that played pretty much the whole game on Saturday. He's a natural. Like I've been aware of him for months. Buddy of mine, Michael Thompson, who writes for 12th Man Rising, has been telling me about Gray Zabel since like September. And I thought, okay, there's always one tackle out of NDSU,
there is. Right? Every year they got one.
Radens, Cody Mock, and those guys usually end up kicking inside. He's a different animal. He just looks like he's built to play football. He's such a natural at it. He looked like he belonged from the first moment he stepped on the field. He was the best offensive lineman there the whole week. And you're right. He didn't lose a single rep until Thursday. And now I can't remember who it was that beat him. I think it might have been Oladejo, Femi Oladejo from UCLA. I've probably got a video of it in my phone because I remember thinking he just lost that rep. Got a chance to talk to him. Like he oozes football player. He might be there at 18. The consensus seems to be that he has gotten himself into the first round, but I don't think it's early first round. I don't think he's going
Graham Barton. He's going to go Graham Barton area. Remember the Duke kid last year? I think it's the same kind of kind of place. Anywhere from 24 to 29, I think, is where he goes.
Look, if the Seahawks had a chance to take Gray Zabel, I'd be celebrating that pick. I think he's a guy that he's a 10-year player, and a starter from day one. If he's available when they pick, I would prepare myself to watch them go up to the podium and say another name. Like that's just kind of life as a Seahawk fan, right? But no, he's as good as advertised.
Yeah, it's good here. And look, those guys, small school, this is as important a part as any player coming out to the Senior Bowl to show out, because level of competition is such a question with those guys. And so him going out there and doing what he did, which, close to kind of being dominant at times, is such a big, the tape looks great for him, but he's taking on guys that'll be accountants and, lawyers and doctors and all that kind of stuff at times. And so,
and he can play in any scheme. He's so scheme versatile. And what really impressed me the most wasn't just how naturally he moved, but when he's able to set and anchor. Day one, the first rep that really impressed me the most is he in individual drills. There was a rep where he lost it early on and he was able to recover. and really in a dynamic way and lock up the defender and win the rep after he'd been beaten. And I think as a Seahawks fan, we have PTSD from seeing guys that are just beaten initially in the rep and have no chance to recover. It's an important skill, and it's not something that all these guys can do. And then you think about, within, playing as part of a unit with guys on either side of him in a phone booth, can be even more effective. So just beyond impressed with him.
Arianti Ursay, did you get a chance to take a look at him at all?
Yeah. I thought of all the tackles, he was the most consistent, and he was the one guy, if they did give him any guard reps, they don't stand out. I don't recall them. I mean, he played almost strictly at tackle.
He's going to be a tackle the next level. I mean, that's the question. Yeah. He's 330, he's 325, so he's got that enough weight to go inside, but that was a bit of the question with the young guy. I think he's like 20 years old as well. And so you go, well, are they going to, does he have enough juice to get it done on that outside? Because the tape's really good. It's one of those things like where it's real rough though, because he is a little bit young. So the highlights are really high and the low lights are really low. But, that's the one that I've looked at as maybe a guy that could change in there to a guard if the Hawks look to target him, but also gives you a little, you talked about a second ago, that Abraham Lucas insurance policy for right tackle.
Yeah, I there was some thought coming into the week that he would play some guard. We just didn't see that. But yeah, and he weighed in even heavy. He weighed in at 339 down there. So 6'5" and a half. So 6'056", 339, 34-inch arms, and 81.25-inch wingspan. Like he's built like a tackle. You're drafting him, you're trying him there until he fails or you have another need. And I think he's right tackle only. They did give him some reps at left tackle. But no, he's an intriguing player.
That's a big 339 and a tackle. That's a big tackle, man.
Mm-hmm.
Greens Farm. Thank you for the $20 donation. Greens Farm says the both of you bounce off each other really well. Reminds me of a couple of OG sports talk radio hosts. Really good chemistry. Well, thank you, Greens Farm. I love having Dan on and been on his show a couple times with it. We're going to try to pull him on here a couple of times. I'm going to try to talk him into come over on the place here on draft day too, as we're going to try to spice that up a bit with it as well. So I love the work you're doing, Dan. And I got to say, it's great seeing you rewarded for that. Sometimes it can be hard with some of the content creators out here on it. I don't suffer from this, but I do see it from others out there where it's hard to sometimes get that growth and the subs are hard to come by and people are very, hesitant to hit that sub button. And so it's like, seeing you kind of get to break through now where you get down and be a little bit on that downhill stretch, because it's that uphill stretch when you're initially kind of getting it. Now you start to get down to where, okay, now the momentum's really rolling and we got some velocity.
Well, thanks Greens Farm for the comment. That means a lot because I think, I have a ton of respect for what you do, first of all, and also maybe CC that message, Greens Farm, to 710 and to KJR. Maybe we can get our own show. But I think
we'd kick everybody's ass if we did. I'll tell you that.
Right?
So
look, I don't know.
I know we would kick everybody's ass because we walk in them with way more background research and doing way more. Like we're just gonna walk on there and like, we'll just go live. We start just talking.
Right.
Like no.
One of the two stations. I'll put it this way. I don't want to name drop. I used to listen to one station more than the other, but then they just became what you just described, where it just seems like they just roll out of bed every day and just go make stuff up. And it's here at the game with the guys behind you drinking beers and just talking about the game, whereas the other station tends to be more journalistically driven, and so I have my preference there. But no, it's very complimentary, especially because I don't know what other markets are like as a whole, but there's so many good content creators that follow the Seahawks, cover the Seahawks. I met another one in the press box on Saturday who I wasn't even aware of. But I'm going to have him on the show. And so that's quite the compliment. I appreciate it.
Yeah, it's very kind. And I think we've got a lot of Hawk content creators out here. We got Bryce Coots in the house here too from Hawk Zone that we really, I think, are lucky as a fan base to have so many good people that are so dedicated to doing this. And it's really great for me to see because I just think that this is so good for all of us. The more folks that are in that legitimate place of doing this and taking it seriously as all of us out here do on this, because the more you seriously and the more work you're putting in, the better the content is. And I think that's true with all of you guys out there. And this is why it's the new media, Dan. I mean, this is why it's, that's where it's going. I don't know that radio is going to be around in 20 years. I don't know if that sports radio dynamic thing is, I think in a lot of ways it's kind of dying off already. And it's dying off because eyeballs are going here now. This is the way this is, because people don't just want somebody rolling out of bed who's done no background or tried to do any research or tried to, it's almost like sometimes the radio people are almost just like a point of pride by how little work they can do. I've sometimes gotten from, it's like, that's not the way this should work. You're needing to entertain people. You got to know what you're talking about. But thank you, Grains Farm. Very, very kind of you to say. And we'll definitely have Dan on here a bunch through the off season. If you'll be so kind. I know you're a busy man now.
Well, I'll give you a little bit of a scoop here, I suppose. I've hinted at this on my channel, but I haven't really made the announcement. I'm a couple of weeks from now, I'm gonna walk away. I'm gonna take a break, a little sabbatical from what has been my career for the last 25 years. And head down to Arizona, where my lady is at the moment. She's a nurse, and that's where she is right now. She travels around. And I'm going to spend the next couple of months at least through the draft. It looks like, things can change. There's a lot of balls in the air, and I'm going to take a break from the regular gig and focus on this full time for a couple of months, see how much I can grow it, see if I can take a step towards being able to do it full time. And then ultimately, maybe I might have to find a little bit of balance there and kind of do both for a while. But for the next couple of months anyway, I'm going to focus more on this. So, and that's all because of the growth and the support and people that watch and appreciate what I do. So,
I'm glad to see it. I'm very glad to see it. This is what I want to. Yeah, this is what we want, folks. Is just that kind of support. These folks. So this is where you want this to go. It's better content. The more content you get from these folks, the more support you throw in. So keep kicking ass, Dan. Keep doing what you're doing on that, man. It's good to hear.
Thanks,
and
appreciate it.
Yeah, it's only a matter of time. Whether or not that cook's in full time now, or whether it's only a matter of time for you on that. Dogzilla in the house. What's up with the $2 don't know? Says, who was the best interior offensive line prospect in mobile, Dan? Was it Zabel?
Yeah, it was. But let's see if I can come up with another name we haven't talked about yet. I don't want to let these guys slip through the cracks. Let's see. Booker
wasn't out there, right?
No, he wasn't. I have another name, although I was challenged on this name when I posted a mock draft a couple of days ago, and this viewer actually had some good points as far as scheme fits. If Clint Kubiak is married to the outside zone scheme, which he says he prefers, but then he'll adapt it to what he has on hand, right? Because Miles Frazier had a really impressive week. I've made the comment that I think his comp might be Damian Lewis, and not just because he's wearing the same helmet from LSU. Built very similar body type. Let's see what his official weigh-ins here. I have all the numbers from Monday when they all and now I can't find him. Did he not weigh in? Okay. Oh, no. Here we go. And then, but that just reminded me of another interesting name. 6'5", 324, 33 and a half inch arms. Teams actually asked for him to get some reps at tackle on Thursday. It didn't look like his natural spot, but just extremely physical, very good in pass protection. Has only given up 1 sack and 2 quarterback hits in the last 2 years playing in the SEC, right? Facing all those defenders. Just once he locks you up, you're done, kind of. Question with him, he's a guy I'm going to be watching really closely at the combine. Like, can he show those types of movement skills and get out and get to the second level? He was really impressive. And then the guy down there that I just don't feel like I can't not talk about. Yeah. Willie Lampkin is one of the more intriguing offensive line prospects I've seen in a long time. Dude shows up, storied career at UNC. He was a late add to the roster down there, played almost exclusively at center and just kept kicking guys' butts, including in the individual drills and the one-on-ones, locking people up at 5'10", 270. Like, when I saw the invitation, I thought, he makes Joey Hunt look big, right?
Right.
But, there's a history in that Gary Kubiak, Mike Shanahan system of preferring smaller centers, some smaller interior linemen that can get out and run. I wrote him off even Tuesday when I saw him standing next to the other guys. Like, I don't want any part of that. Just kept winning just over and over and over again.
Did he go up against Deion Walker? Did he go up any reps against him? And did him and Deion Walker go head to head?
I saw them standing next to each other, and that really pointed it out. Walker at 6'7.5" and Lampkin at 5'10". I can't recall, but from what I saw from Walker this week, Lampkin probably won the rep. If they did go against each other, I'll just put it that way. I wasn't really impressed by Walker.
I don't like Walker at all. Everybody looks at him with the size and they go, well, he'll be the nose tackle. He'll move Byron Murphy off nose now because we'll draft him. I'm like, he doesn't have good nose tackle reps on tape. He's more big 3 tech is kind of what he is, really.
But he super interesting player. And then there's been some thought that like you can use him as a fullback too. Like that'd be pretty cool in the red zone, right? But
that's something that's part of Kubi. I mean, he's taking that from Shanahan. He had Taysom Hill in that fullback role big time last year. So it's something that he does. I mean, I think they had Darvin Ham with Minnesota in 21.
They had there was even another guy on the roster list. I can't remember his first name, Adam maybe, but Prentice, who was listed as a fullback full time, in addition to Taysom Hill down there. So yeah, we'll certainly something to keep an eye on. This running back group is so deep, and there are some bigger guys in there. I could see him. If they feel like they're going to carry 4 or 5 running backs on the roster because of that, maybe one could sort of, play as a fullback. Like fullbacks really aren't bred anymore. You kind of have to make one out of something else, right?
Well, you got to find an undersized tight end, basically, because it's hard to get the 6. A lot of people ask me about get the 6'4", 6'5" guys out there, and it's like there's a reason back when they didn't have those guys as fullbacks because they can't get into the pads of the linebacker. I think you're coming down, and when you're hitting them in the hole, and you got to want to come up and clear, and they can't do that as much. So,
like one guy that I saw down here that I thought would fit that mold. Near the end of the week, they gave him some fullback reps, and he did it in the game too. Was Harold Fannin, the tight end out of Bowling Green? I don't know. He's not the most natural mover, and he's not as fluid as I would like at tight end. Certainly not as much as some of the other guys that were down here, but he can block and he can get physical, and he could absolutely fit that kind of dual sort of hybrid mold.
Let me ask you about him, because I've got a theory on tight ends. I want to run up the flagpole with you in regards to this. And I know I'm pulling you a bit of time, so tell me if
we're good.
Yeah. I've got a theory on these tight ends, like tight ends that kind of separate and become really good. There's obviously the freak shows that are just freak shows. But even on the freak shows, there's this like weird thing like running backs where there's this real, rather than them being like archetypes of their 1 or 2 or 3, it's like the kind of the weirder you are, there's like more of a potential of a tight end that you can kind of be different. You can be that separating guy, like Tony Gonzalez when he came in the league, basketball background. Antonio Gates, also basketball background, but also just moved differently. And I look at Fannin, and it's like he's got the inverse bow-legged thing going, where like the knees are almost Kenny Smith like rubbing together.
He's got a weird running style. Yeah, you're right. It's very choppy, very short steps, very stiff hips.
I've called it like it's like he's cross-country skiing when he's running, is what it looks like a little bit.
Okay.
And so, but it's also, I go back to, and I wonder on that with these like Gronk really stiff, right? I mean, super stiff, super big, but just incredible ball catch skills. And so I'm just want to run this theory out. Do you think there's something maybe to that theory? Or do you think maybe this is kind of more of an in-betweenish guy where it's like, you got to kind of use him as a weaponish H-back, maybe fullback, maybe kind of just kind of pepper him in a little bit more than he could become maybe that kind of guy?
That's how I feel about him, because his that running style and sort of that, and again, he's another guy that I think the combine could really help or hurt, like could be very impactful for him, just to see how that looks in shorts, right? Because he's just not a smooth, natural mover, and he's not sudden in his movements. Like he had trouble separating in the one-on-ones for sure. But he has so much going for him. He catches the ball really well. I mean, he did it 107 times last year. And once he gets going, I think he'll run a good 40.
I do too.
But straight line speed. But the fact, if he wasn't willing to be physical or capable of doing it at all, I'd think, that he's a guy that I don't even want to have on my board in some respects. Yeah. The fact he can do those other things and has shown a willingness and an ability to lay guys out and pancake some guys and put a head on a head, I think that helps his profile. I think he's solidly in day 2 because of that, if a team has a plan for him. And I think, look, tight end's a big need on the Seahawks roster, especially if they move off Noah Fant, with Kubiak liking to use, 2 and 3 tight ends as much as he does. Maybe Brady Russell kind of fits that role if he can stay healthy, of being able to play some fullback too. But if you're going to have 3-4 guys on the roster that have different skill sets, a guy like Fannin could really fit, because Kubiak likes to use that type of player.
I think he could, and he gives you some. He's really tight in the hips too, but he's got an ability with yak. It doesn't make sense. It shouldn't work, but he actually can give you some yak after the catch too, which
Yeah.
stands out on his tape. And over 100 catches this year with Bowling Green. Tremendously productive player. Bryce Coots, what's up, man? It's good to see you in the
Hey,
house, brother.
what's up?
Thank you for 3 months as a member. He says, "Hey guys, so glad I was able to catch the crossover. I do think Jake Peets will remain on the staff, or will we get a new PGC will be named?"
We should. I would think we'd find out soon, right? We got all the coaching news today, except
We did.
there was nothing about that. There was even confirmation in the release they put out that Scott Huff would not be retained, which once John Benton was hired, I think that was a no-brainer. Peets is a mystery to me. I thought there was a lot of buzz throughout the season that they really liked him. There was the reporting that they even that the great Corbin Smith piece that they even thought about making a change at the bye week. And if they had done that, presumably Peets would have been the guy to call plays for the second half of the year. He spent a little bit of time with McVay, but yet there was no consideration of him for the coordinator job, which I thought that was really interesting in that Mike McDonald press conference, how quickly he shut that down when he was asked about him. They allowed him to interview in Chicago. That all tells me that he's not going to be part of it. It just seems like there's something that held him back from in consideration for the coordinator job. And unless Kubiak, I don't think they have any history together, unless they just click. I would be more inclined to say that he's not going to be on the roster, and that they'll either bring in another pass game coordinator, or maybe Janoko gets some of those responsibilities as well as being the quarterback coach.
I agree with what you said, man. There was a feeling that you had on this kind of during the year, and that they were almost laying the groundwork to be hiring him. I mean, it seemed like they were leaking stuff out in that way, and then they just kind of pulled the rug out once we got to actually hiring time, which I'm glad that they did. I don't want them. I'm not a big fan of in-house hiring in general, to be honest with you. That's a lot of what led Carroll astray at the end. I don't think your best candidate in the entire nation resides within your own building in general terms. That's not a smart way to approach it. So I'm glad they did do an exhaustive process here. We'll see with Jake. It is kind of hard to say, but I think that's probably in general terms pretty accurate the way that you summarized it there on that side of it. So yeah, probably he moves on. Hard to say who it would be though. It's on the,
and like all those guys, he'll probably just go right back to the Rams. Like those McVay guys, if they don't stick elsewhere, he just, Mike LaFleur, he just say, come on back.
Yep. They'll bounce him right back over there, and he'll be, passing this coordinator or whatever on that. Mark Sanchez, thank you for 15 months as a Hawks Nest member. Says, thoughts on Kellen Moore being named to the Saints head coach? Oh, what an upside. There's some upside down organizations in the NFL right now, isn't there, Dan?
Yeah. And it's, I hate that he finally is getting an opportunity, because he was a hot name a couple of years ago, right? When he was only like 18 years old. No, he was obviously 3 years younger then when he was with the Cowboys. But there was some thought that he might, end up the head coach there, during his time there, and then that he might be a candidate this year after they decide to move on from Mike McCarthy. It's such a cool personal story for me, because I covered his dad in high school, Tom Moore, not the Tom Moore that was Peyton Manning's longtime quarterback coach with the Colts. He coached the Prosser High School football team for decades, and they went to multiple state championships, and they were one of the highlights of my old long ago broadcasting career, was covering that team. And in fact, his dad, when I was let go in a contract dispute for my first job, his dad wrote the station a letter, and also wrote a letter to the editor of the local paper saying they were making a mistake. That was kind of cool. But at the time, I think Kellen was like 6 or 7. He was always at practice, bouncing around, ball boy. To think that kid is about to be an NFL head coach is pretty cool. It's just, I don't know that you can win in that situation. It's their cap issues. They've been avoiding him for years. They're not going to be able to avoid him any longer. They're going to have to gut that roster. Who's your quarterback? I don't know that it's a winnable situation, outside of maybe you go down there and you do enough to show yourself that when you're not employed by the Saints anymore, either by your choice or theirs, at some point, that the rest of the league can see that was an unwinnable situation. You get another opportunity. Happy for the kid. I just that's a tough spot to be.
Saints needs to tank for Arch Manning. Tear it all down, pull it down to the studs, clear your cap space out.
So you're going to tank for a guy. I'm glad you brought that up, though, because everyone wants to talk about Arch Manning. Are you going to tank for a guy who is only going to have 12 starts in college, 13 starts?
Well, it depends on the 13 starts. It depends on the 13 starts
next year. I think he's a 2-year guy.
Number one overall pick. If he knows he's going to be the number one overall pick, you think he goes back to college? I mean, look, Peyton did go back to his senior year.
He lights it up.
Off, but he's
going to have for the sake of being a Seahawks fan, if he and Nussmeier and Aller all, there's potential next year. I feel like we say this every year, right?
Yeah.
But next year I think there's some better options.
Well, we do say it every year, but we also don't we didn't say this year was going to be necessarily, I think we were having talks, coming to the college season, we're like, the quarterback talent this year. And likewise, when you had a CJ Stroud and a Bryce Young, and you didn't know necessarily whether Anthony Richardson was going to do, but his name was up there as a potential guy who could rise up on that. Where there's going to be some good classes, coming down too. And I say it joking about the Saints. I do think that the Saints really got to peel this thing down. If they want to do Kellen Moore right and they want to do this appropriately and want to fix where they've gone wrong so often, it's allow Kellen to come in here and slowly build this up. It is take that bad money off the books now, take it down. And a happy outcome could be that you do kind of tank and become the worst team in the NFL. But you kind of have to also because of how badly you have stretched this situation out that it's like a slingshot. You pulled it so far out this way that now it has to snap back the other direction to correct itself a little bit here and to get this on the right path.
I've never been a fan of intentionally tanking, but
no, me neither.
Unintentional because it's really the only path to getting better is makes sense. And you're right. And if they do that, then it buys them some time, certainly, because you can't win in that situation. So
at the very least, you clear the cap. You're not $70 million over the cap every year, but just take 1 year and go, which they've not done since, even when Peyton left, they've not done it 1 year. Just let's not do this year. Let's not do this dance this year. Let's just take it all down, pull it all up, and then clear it away and call it a day on that. So,
is there anyone we want to poach from that roster to bring with Kubiak that might? I know that I've heard some.
I'm not big on Juwan Johnson. He's a free agent tight end, so I'm out on that. There's not really going to be a lineman that's going to be available from their sake on that side of it.
A free agent? Is he out?
Who?
Fabian Moreau? Is he? He's a guy someone threw at me the other day, but I
don't think he's a free agent. No, on that roster, I want to say no. He might be, but I don't think that there's anybody that they really look to target on that roster. I mean, you could maybe make a trade for a Shaheed. I don't think the Saints are really looking to move that, though. He's not on a real expensive deal. And defensively, there's not really anything there. So I think you're kind of just no. That's the problem is that the roster is not particularly deep right now either. It's like, it's got a lot of yuck kind of to it a little bit as it's sort of set up right now. Yeah. PGZ, thank you for gifting 5 Hawks Nest memberships. So please do, folks, keep an eye in the comment section as you might have just been gifted a membership here by PGZ. I thank you for doing that, PGZ. I don't know who they gifted to, but they will be let know of that on their side. And you're awesome for doing that, brother. Here, if I can see real quick.
Oh, and I got the name. By the way, I got the name wrong. It's not Fabian Moreau's a defensive back somewhere, right? It's Foster.
You're Foster Moreau. Okay. I knew you were on the right path, though. I know Moreau. There's a Moreau tight end I know you're talking about with that.
And he's under contract through 25. So.
Okay. Yeah. So, yeah, he's out of the mix.
And then in true Saints fashion, he's got 3 void years after that. So
their contracts have been ridiculous the last few years. It's kind of one of the enjoyments I get where no matter where our cap situation is, where people, we're in it, and I go look at theirs and I'm like, I feel so much better. It's like it's a warm breeze coming through when you watch theirs. Like it looks hellacious. And they just every year these teams do this. They can't get themselves out of that purgatory state. It's a place that we're going to eventually finish up on today when we get to the finish point where I want to talk to you about this on just you get stuck in that purgatory state as a team. You can't get out of it. And you make these decisions that just perpetually keep you in that bind. You just will not call the ball and pull yourself out of it. You always just keep kind of dipping yourself back in the waters and you can't help yourself. And it's the smart organizations that do it. It's the dumb organizations that don't. And this is the worst place to be. It's not the worst place. A lot of fans talk about, Dan, that the worst place to be is to be bad. Well, that's how you're going to be horrible. And it's not the worst place to be. The worst place to me is in between because you're stuck there for so long. Yeah. That's the thing. It's not a year or two experience. It's something you often find yourself 10 years there, like we've been for kind of 10 years in this
Right.
way.
Yeah.
But PGZ, you are the man today, man. Thanks for the donations and gifting out 5 subs out there to Hawks Nest members. I really do appreciate you for doing that, man. Thank you so much for that. Do keep an eye, folks, if you just got gifted a membership. It didn't say here on the StreamYard PGZ on who got gifted, so, but it will let them know on their notifications on that. So thank you for that, man. Adam Baum, thanks for the $10 donation. Adam says, hey, Dan, any thoughts on the rumor to trade Geno to the Browns for Myles Garrett?
Well, I haven't heard that rumor, but it's only been 2 hours since he put out his statement, so that didn't take very long. And so let me think about this. You're pretty much swapping. Oh, let me see. I just had the page up for let's see what the Cleveland overall cap situation is.
It's horrible. They have the second least amount of cap space in the NFL.
Yeah, they're 30 over. So you're going to take on Geno. You'd have to trade. Obviously, this would be a trade. You're taking on, what did you say, like a $12 million cap hit? But you save $31 million by moving Geno. So you're going to take back. Coming back the other way, what'd you say it was? Let's see.
Coming back the other way.
19.7.
Yeah.
So I don't know how the
Browns. No, it's not 19. It's not 19. Yeah, it's they would have to be creative in how they do this, and he may have to move it around. So what's weird about this is that they save. I'm sorry, I'm just trying to read this a little bit. The way I read this is that, so it's a $36 million dead money hit. So it's negative $16 million that they would have to do to make this work.
Right.
So probably actually ends up pushing up the cost of more 2 first-round picks because you have to pay for the Browns eating the dead money, like you do on some of these other deals, like the Goff or the Russell Wilson deal. You have to end up giving more because of that money situation. But I don't know if the Geno thing works as much on them with this. I think if they're moving Garrett, it's to move assets and then to get the young quarterback in and then just start to kind of build this back through. It's not out of the realm of possibility that they look at it like this is a team that is one of those purgatory-like teams, only purgatory on the bad side, but like they always talk themselves into being contender-like, right? So Dan, they definitely misidentify themselves on the often and off seasons. But I think it'd be hard to do the Geno thing with that.
I do now. If they want, Sam Howell would make a lot of sense for them. If they're just looking for a guy to, stopgap to get through, and they're kind of soft tanking themselves until they can get rid of this, the Watson situation and kind of do what the Denver Broncos did. Although how quickly they were able to bounce back and recover from that is remarkable. I don't think any of us saw that coming. So you're probably not going to replicate that. But yeah, you want a cheap 25-year-old quarterback that started 17 games in the league. I mean, it's probably better than what you have on the roster currently. Maybe we could talk, but it doesn't seem like it would work with Geno. And I don't think Geno's going anywhere. I could be wrong. I have left open the possibility that John might be in the mood to do something kind of dynamic when it comes to the QB situation this offseason. But I think the Clint Kubiak hire and John Denton and all the guys he's bringing with him tends to make more sense to me if you're sticking with your veteran quarterback.
I certainly think it's the straightforward way of approach it going. I think the thing that makes it kinky is you got to sign him to an extension. Yep. And that there is no getting through this another year on this. And, do you want to pay for this quarterback at this age? My thing with this has been that, Dan, if they want to take this approach, I'm fine with it, but you need to be real aggressive in how you address the offensive line. You intimated earlier about having the offensive line maybe taken care of prior to getting to the draft. I think that means they have to change their ways in that approach because that's not what they've done in free agency in recent history for a long, long period of time. Well over a decade have they not gone down that approach. And I think you've got to hit it with some of the top end guys to make that happen. And then it makes sense signing Geno because you've given him now the protection up front to make it go. But if you're just going to short sell it, you're going to go for that veteran aging, guy that's 34 years old that you're hoping to squeeze one more year out of at left guard, and then hoping there's some natural development that comes from a Bradford, and we'll go get another 3rd round guy and hope that that's proven in recent history that's not going to play out well. So I would not be in favor if that's their approach. So I'm kind of one or the other on that. If you're going to go this way, then go hard with it. If you're not, then I'd just as soon as pivot the other direction with it, especially because I think in Geno, there would be a market for him out there, at least for like a 3rd round pick. from some team out there that's quarterback hungry that doesn't like the options that are available on the open market, especially if, like you said, Darnold goes to the Raiders, which I do think is the first domino that falls on this quarterback situation.
Yeah, and there's so many balls in the air potentially that we won't know until teams have bonus deadlines coming up and things, and between now and March have to make these decisions, because the veteran quarterback market could explode. You could be looking at, Derek Carr and Kirk Cousins being available, and that kind of muddies the waters a little bit, and certainly would, I think, reduce maybe the market for Geno. So
I think he's actually helped in this situation, because when the way the market is, that there are options out there, but there are options that are all, I think, worse than where Geno is. Derek Carr, for instance, has been broken down bodily wise quite a bit here in the last couple of years. He is not holding up well. He made it through 10 games last year, and he was already injured through like 6 games last year. A guy like Russell Wilson's not going to have a lot of value out there as far as open market. I mean, Darnold's definitely going to have more than Geno, but I think there's an argument to be made if Geno is available, that he becomes the second most valuable guy on the open market available at that point.
I'd agree with that.
And so I think that's enough to, again, I'm not thinking you're going to get a second round, but I think third round valuation then back as a mid to late third round back on that. I think that's very realistic on that side. And I'm not advocating for it. If you're not going to go hard on this in the way that John's gone for the last 14 years, it's kind of a leap for me to think that this is going to be the year that he finally figures it out. He's going to go spin it. Hopefully, I hope. But I mean, I can only go off the 14 years of track record, which is Robert Gallery was the last major free agent signing you made on the offensive line. That was 15 years ago.
Yeah.
So I hope, man, but I'm reticent. And since I'm reticent, I go, okay, well then move off until you're going to develop the line and get that superseded. Then go get the quarterback after you set up the line, because it just doesn't make any sense otherwise. But I'm okay either way. I
guess where I sit on the Geno thing is I don't think Schneider's out there burning up the phones trying to find a trade partner, trying to unload him. But I think if someone comes to him and says, we'll give you this, and it's valuable enough, then I think Schneider listens, and he probably is. And I certainly think he's prepared for anything, to be fluid. Like he has a plan B and a plan. That's just how he operates. Right. But yeah, I think it's their best path for now, because there is a reasonable expectation, at least for me, that this is a team that won 10 games with a bad first half, right? And they lost some games they shouldn't have lost. They were that close, and there's just one glaring weakness on the team that we all felt like held them back from being better. And you have a chance to address that one thing. If we were the Dutch boy standing at the dike and we had only 10 fingers and 11 holes, different story. I'm moving off my veteran quarterback. I'm trying to go young and save money because I have other big glaring needs to address. That's not the situation here. And so I think it makes the most sense to stick with your guy for now, because either way, if you're of the camp that the Seahawks have to get a young quarterback, they have to turn that page. Okay, you need to have a good offensive line in place. You need to have the infrastructure. So either way, they have to address that this offseason. And then if that is the case and we're both right and Geno's the guy in 2025, well, then if you've fixed that to a certain degree to where you can play that kind of complementary football that Mike McDonald talks about, and he just sent a letter to season ticket holders talking about his vision here right before we went live. Well, then you're going to do that either way, and regardless of who your quarterback is, and address that. So.
Well, that's where I guess I'd ask you on that. I mean, is it thinking that you're just 3 players away from getting to the playoffs, or you're that fixing this one thing away from getting to being a contender?
I think in terms of contention, just getting into the playoffs doesn't do anything.
I think as well, but that's I would offer to you that I think that right now where we stand, we're going to need an outside corner, we're going to need a nose tackle, we're going to need 3 interior offensive lines need to be fixed up. Probably need some insurance for Abraham Lucas. We're going to need a Z receiver as a replacement for Tyler Lockett.
Oh, absolutely.
We're going to need a H-back tight end, another tight end in addition to that. Where I go, so where I'm going with this is there's some wonder in my mind if there's not kind of a lot more work that needs to be done, where if you're signing a Geno, it's because you're going to be a contender next year. Like the teams came into this year, knew they were going to be contenders by and large. Yes, was there a Viking team that made some noise? Sure. But we knew coming in, Eagles, Ravens, Buffalo Bills, Detroit Lions. Like, you could go down the line. You knew coming in, and we don't know coming into next year that we're ready to contend and signing Geno to that extension, in my opinion. This is my opinion. I'm not, I know there's a variance on this, so it's not that I am the only, but it's just my thinking on this is just that I look at that and I go, man, being that there are those question marks that are there that we don't know, and then we got to sign this guy to the biggest contract on our roster. He's going to sign the biggest contract at 35 years old on our roster now going forward. I've got some trepidations on this a little bit, Dan, from my perspective.
Yeah, so do I. And I think all of those needs that you just listed are absolutely valid, but I would categorize those as routine annual needs. Every year you go into the offseason, into the draft, having a couple positions you have to address. But I feel so good about what we saw in that defense the second half of the season that there's pieces in place there. And now that Mike McDonald is involved in the process the entire offseason, like, they'll find those solutions. I'm speaking more in terms of position group wise, that the one thing that held this team back from contending last year was offensive line play, period. And maybe it's not just all on the 9 guys on the roster that play that position. I think Ryan Grubb deservedly, has to take a lot of accountability for that. And he paid for it with his job. Like, he didn't do the things that you can do to help out your offense with a bad offensive line. And so that's where I'm coming at it from. If there were other options, like, I wish I was one of those fans, and they come at me all the time. You've probably heard them too. I wish I believed in Justin Fields. I do. Mm-hmm. If I did, I'd make the move and I'd go get him for the Sam Darnold contract, right? I do the 1 year, $10 million deal. That's probably about his market if a team believes in him. And I would move off of him and take that shot. I don't. And I don't see anyone else out there that I believe in either. You can take those shots, but now you're talking about just do it because. And that's the fan perspective that I have a hard time getting on board with, is he simply costs too much money. He threw too many picks in the red zone. Get rid of him and we'll figure it out. Well, a lot of times in that situation, figuring it out means you're falling. It means you have no shot to win 10 games again. And now you're starting all over, and now you're desperate for a quarterback, and you're lumped in that group with some of these other teams that we see chasing it every year.
Agreed. I'm definitely with the Geno thing. It has really less to do almost with Geno and the skill set, almost a little bit more with just the age, state of the team, how close you're. That's really as much as what impels me than it is with a limitation of Geno, or that the cost is so exorbitant. It's really not that. It's more of just some of these other factors. Question I want to pose to you that I know is outside the box, and everyone says a little bit pie in the sky, but I wonder if not is maybe a fluid situation like this Myles Garrett one. And that is a guy that is not going to probably be available. I just want to ask you on this in a theoretically, because we're turning over in this, and that's Joe Burrow. And that Joe Burrow is looking at right now with Cincinnati a situation where, number one, first, I know he signed the new contract. Cincinnati buried the money down the line. This is a cash broke organization. Yeah, they had to basically
openly about it too. Yeah,
right. They had to rob, borrow, and steal just to get the contract put together for Burrow to bury the money down the line. They're going to lose Trey Hendrickson to free agency. They're going to lose T. Higgins to free agency. They pissed off Jamar Chase last year by not signing him after 3 years to a contract extension, forcing him to play through a 4th year of his deal. Very likely that he doesn't want to be there going into the future. Joe looks around and looks at that and goes, wow, I'm going to lose all those guys, and I'm just going to stand around, and I've got people breaking into my house here. So here's my potential to you. It would cost you a Godfather offer to make this kind of move. 3 first-round picks, plus you've got to move DK to get an extra 4th-round pick, plus you got to move whatever you get back in assets back for Geno Smith. The totality of all that, if a trade was available for Joe, would you make that kind of move?
10 days out of 10, 100%. And this is a conversation that I have with people all the time, like that when they talk in terms of like how easily they could upgrade from Geno. It's not easy. Because wherever you think he belongs, you're right. You want to call him mid, which means you think he's between the 15th and the 20th best quarterback on the planet, because that's what we're talking about here. Then tell me how you're going to acquire one of the 15 in front of them. They're not available. They're just not. And if one of those top 5 or 6 guys ever becomes available, you move heaven and earth to get him. We saw the Rams make that bold move a few years ago that shocked everybody, kind of coming out of left field. It got them a Super Bowl. If Joe Burrow was truly available, you move heaven and earth to get him, because he can help you to overcome some of those things, right? He might not be all that excited about coming here unless he sees a plan for the offensive line, but I don't think he has a no trade clause, so he wouldn't really have a say in it. No, you do everything you can to get a guy like that in the prime of his career, no matter what.
Agreed. Yeah. And I know it's not likely, but if it does, some weird crack opens up because of the nature of that situation and that
He
Bengals
would
team.
have to not want to be there.
Yeah, but then again, it's like,
Yeah.
does he want to be there losing those guys? Does he want to go through a rebuild at 28, 29 years old on a Bengals team that doesn't spend money that, I mean, I could see him easily pushing at that point, couldn't you? And since they've set up that contract to be able to get him out of town without having to eat a bunch of dead money to do it, there's a way to get it done from their perspective as well. So
I mean,
it's unlikely, but
he can't be happy that his general manager just came out and said, basically kind of in a defensive way, said, we can't pay every position the top of the market. Like we can't pay all these guys.
Yep.
That's I'm tilting my head if I'm Joe Burrow and I'm thinking, what the hell are you talking about? Like,
yeah. I mean, and we know players will push out in these situations. We know they'll get to a point of like, they do get fed up in this. This is an empowerment age in a lot of ways. And we're on a day where Myles Garrett's talking about wanting to push out of town. And so it's even these guys that are, held up in such high esteem in this place, they'd never let that guy go. Well, it's like, look, there's a lot of factors that go into this, and it ain't just about how much you love your guy a lot of times, especially in the Browns case. I mean, they had to do some weird deal even to get the Burrow contract. I was just hearing a story yesterday about they had to do some kind of acrobatics just to get the Burrow deal done. Like they didn't have the money and they had to do some like sign away the naming rights on something to this or something just to get enough cash to go get it done to get it through. So just something to pay attention to. I don't know. Thrill House, thank you for the $2 donation. Says thoughts on Yaya Black and the tight end out of Iowa, Lachey, another one of those Iowa tight ends. Man, is he in the? I haven't watched either of those two guys. I think Lachey was at Senior Bowl.
Lachey went to the Shrine game, but I just read something the other day. I think he's having another surgery. Like he has major injury background. I think he was a back at one point. Wasn't sure if he was going to be able to continue playing. Then he had an ACL. Iowa tight ends are usually a safe bet, but he's got some physical issues that give me pause. And it's such a good tight end class. You can go with you can find a safer prospect for sure. Now I did learn this while I was down there. It's Waya is how you pronounce it. It's Waya Black.
Waya.
He's a massive dude. Caught my eye day one. He was a guy that I watched pretty closely throughout the week because let's see what the official weigh-in was. He's massive. He looks like Dayon Walker, but he's more, his lower half is a little bit more in proportion. Walker's kind of high cut. Which
Walker's got the worst body, dude. He's got that cottage cheese belly.
That pad level, straight up and down. He's going to suck some team in thinking that because he can move well for that size, but I just don't see the dominance. But let's see if we go Waya Black. He measured in at 6'5.5", 337, 10.25 inch hands, 35-inch arms, and an 84.25-inch wingspan. I think that's the longest. That's the biggest wingspan that checked in at the Senior Bowl that it is. But there were too many times throughout the week that I just didn't see impact from him. So I think he's more of a block eater than a playmaker. But my goodness, he's a big dude, plays with intensity. There were 3 or 4 dust-ups on Wednesday when we were in full pads, and every time I looked over to see what was going on, he was in the middle of it. That can be a good thing or a bad thing sometimes, but he plays with a lot of intensity, and he's a guy that, we need a bigger dude, right? We need a guy that can play some nose. I'm not sure if that's his role, but he's certainly a guy you can move around, and you can play him as a big edge, and you can reduce him down inside. He might fit. He might fit. He just didn't didn't make the plays that I had hoped I'd see him make during the week.
We do need the big edge. I think that's something they tried to get last year. They hope Mike Morris could become it. He didn't really become it last year. Yeah. It is more necessity here that this is something McDonald's scheme needs. And I just don't think it's as much, even though Derek Hall is a big, powerful guy, he's just not a power edge. It's just not really what he does. He's just really like a guy that you just want to, line up wide and then have him just getting downhill and then, just trying to walk, power rush his guy in the backfield. It's not as much the guy that's just rooting down and setting that edge over there from what I've seen from him. So maybe that they take a look at there. Greens Farm. Thank you for another $5 donation. Greens Farm says, when it comes to fullback, have any of you two looked at the Ohio State guy that opted to return for another year? Can't remember his name.
Nope.
I'm aware of the 2 running backs, but Greens Farm, I'm sorry, I'm not too aware of the tight end going back. It's not G. Scott's kid, right? He's a tight end, so he's not a fullback there.
No.
but I can't think of the guy on that as far as fullback goes out of Ohio State.
I think the thing nowadays with fullbacks, if you're someone that still wants to use one, and that Shanahan tree seems to be the only one, like, Kyle Juszczyk and although Patrick Richard, who's a free agent, right? So there's been a lot of kind of people connecting dots there. But even he was like, wasn't he a converted defensive lineman and played some tight end?
He's a fullback with no hands and no pass.
Yeah.
If you're gonna have a fullback, you got to have the guy
only.
like a use check guy. Really, like Ricard's he's not a real legit option for us because of the fact that you're going to find a guy that can give you H-back type flow as a pass catcher from the fullback position. So he's going to find somebody. I will guarantee you that we're talking about fanning in. There's going to be some, and whoever it is, that Jackson Haas, blocking tight end, one of the better blocking tight ends in this draft, better blocking tight ends in this draft on the move. So move him out phrase, get him out in front. What you ask, I do like a lot, by the way, that with this offense, that so much of what you had last year at times with the poor run blocking, especially, was the one guy that failed at his job failed so badly that there was penetration that blew the whole play up. And what you get with those fullbacks is they get to be that kind of first line of defense. Okay, we messed up the block on the front end. I'll take care of that quick penetrator. And a guy like Walker now doesn't have to dance around that first guy in the backfield. He's taken care of, and I can just get downhill to where I'm trying to get to in the hole. And I like that for that fullback with what we have in our line and how it's kind of set up right now. You the same on that?
Yeah. And while you were answering that, I just looked this up, and indeed, Adam Prentice is a free agent. Contract expired this year, 27 years old, 6 foot 245, out of South Carolina. He was an undrafted free agent of the Broncos. He was on that Saints roster last year as a fullback. Like, he's a free agent and a guy that's not going to cost you anything. His cap number was 1.1 million last year, and the position he plays is not going to cost you any more than that. Like, that would make a lot of sense. If you really want a guy who's experienced playing fullback and you're willing to commit a roster spot to him, and you would hope that he's a good special teams player too, like, in the Nick Bellore kind of mold, where he's not just a fullback because he's going to be limited in how he's used that way. Like, there's a guy that's available.
The only thing is that they used Taysom in that role 24/7, so they didn't really give him any snaps.
Hey, you know what? Hey, so John Reese Plumlee, right? I was thinking about this. If you want to replicate the Taysom Hill role, right? We know that they signed Plumlee halfway through the season. I thought at the time it was because it was right before the first Arizona game. And so I thought, okay, that makes sense. They already have Jaron Hall in the practice squad. Plumlee's more of a runner than he is a thrower. That's your scout team guy to emulate Murray, right? Then we find out none of the reporters that cover the team on a regular basis knew this was happening until they elevated him in week 18 as a slot receiver, and they had converted him there, right? You're talking about a 6-foot guy that's thickly built, really dynamic athlete. I think he was the fastest clocked quarterback in the class last year, and can throw the football too. Like, all right, sign me up for that. Maybe that guy can play some fullback and play kind of that Taysom Hill role if you want to replicate that. Yeah, no, I like it. I'd totally be open to it. And I like where they're going with it too. Just that this is a great way with so much of the NFL is now on the cylindrical side of things, going back to more of the running game the last couple of years with the cover 2 shell proliferation. I think this is where this kind of scheme and having the fullback out there could be a good timing for where the NFL is at to be able to take advantage of that versus some of the spread stuff that's really more a bit of the du jour across the league a bit. Yeah. Are you buying that this is I think this is a tight end class that's as deep as we've seen in at least 10 years? Are you in that same place of it? I've heard as far back as 2010. It may be. I can't think of the one that's this deep. I want to say off the top of my head, I'd have to look it up. But 2 years ago, I thought it was thought to be a really deep class. Yeah, I would tend to lean towards yes, because you have a little bit of both. You have the two elite guys at the top, Tyler Warren, Colson Loveland. Like, those guys are going in the first round. Those guys are making an impact as a rookie and can do a little bit of everything. And then now you have this group that going into the Senior Bowl was thought of as that level. And then I think a guy like Mason Taylor improved his profile while he was down there, just showing off his athleticism, his ability to win as a route runner and in contested balls. And then he's had some injury issues. And so I think teams have seen Elijah Arroyo out of Miami, and that he's like, okay, when he's healthy, he's kind of just behind that level. there's a lot of cool shapes and sizes too. There's some guys later on that are more blockers. Jake Brenningstall out of Clemson is more of a Y move tight end that you're not going to really want to play in line. So, and then there's Harold Fannin, who we talked about. He's a little bit of a hybrid. So just about every shape or size that you want. It's a good year to have a good tight end class when you're the Seahawks, because while all these other teams are climbing over each other to get to this running back group, I don't think we're going to draft one because I think they like the room they have. And so maybe we can take advantage of that tight end class.
That'd be nice. And I like these guys a lot. I think it's fair to say that is as deep as we've, kind of seen. Was there a nose? We need to get Byron Murphy out of the nose tackle role next year. Was there a guy at Senior Bowl or a couple guys? This is one of those places that from a draft standpoint, I go year after year in the draft and I'm like, man, in the first 4 rounds, I've got 2 nose tackles that are worthy of being drafted. I have 1 nose tackle that's worthy of being drafted. Did it look as lean as it typically does based on some of the Senior Bowl you're seeing from that? I think it's like we got a couple guys I think that are outside the Senior Bowl going to be interesting guys in that range. But anything more beyond that to kind of stack this up a little bit thicker?
Yeah, I saw a couple guys down here. I was really hoping we'd see Kenneth Grant. He ended up choosing the Shrine Bowl, and then I think he was an opt-out guy. I don't think he played in the game. Him. I know Jordan Phillips, Maryland, had a really good week down there too. Maybe he doesn't quite fit that mold. He's 310. There were 2 guys down here. Jamari Caldwell from Oregon had a really good Tuesday and Wednesday, and he's in that 340-pound range. Let me pull up the official measurements again. Jamari Caldwell did check in at 6'2", 342. Really, just really sudden and explosive in his first step and getting off the ball. It was something I didn't anticipate. I'd seen quite a bit of Jordan Birch, who ended up not coming down here kind of the last minute. He pulled out. I think he was hurt. But Caldwell was just made Tuesday, Wednesday, just made his presence felt. And you felt him, right? You noticed him, you felt him. And then he got banged up near the end of the day, Thursday, and ended up not playing in the game. And then the other guy is Cam Jackson out of Florida, who weighs in at 345, I think. Let's be accurate here. Cameron Jackson, 6'6.5", 339, with an 83.25-inch wingspan, and moves better than a guy that's 340 pounds should move. Really outstanding in the bag work and the individual drills, and then held up well in the team stuff. And he's a guy that when I'm doing mock drafts and I'm looking at big boards, he's like 6th round all day. But a guy that I think has a much chance of being that nose tackle we need for the reasons that you mentioned than a Cameron Young, if he should ever get healthy and be able to stay healthy. There's some value there at nose tackle in this class, and it's something that's been lacking for the last couple of classes, as you send guys over 320, to be honest, at the DT position.
Yeah, it's always lean, but it does seem like, and even outside the Senior Bowl, you got the Nazir Stackhouse. Georgia's an interesting kind of nose tackle. The Ohio State kid's an interesting nose tackle. So you got options, man. That's where I come back to, like, the drafts to me is not as weak. It's actually got some strength to the places we need. We need a couple tight ends. You got a good tight end draft. You need interior offensive lineman and Slash can play some tackle. You got that in this draft. So
another guy that wasn't down here, but Albert Collins. Texas. He's a guy that Matt Miller had going to us in the 2nd round in his 2-round mock draft that he put out late last night. So that's another guy that just really fits that mold. Reunite him maybe with Murphy.
We can't forget about Darrell Jackson Jr. in this draft. We can go back to a lineage of Seattle.
Yeah, he's a guy you brought up to me the last time when we did the roundtable a couple of months ago. And I actually thought, but he's Florida State, right? And so when I got to Mobile, I thought Cameron Jackson was Darrell Jackson's son. I had to realize my mistake there, but I thought, okay, how did that guy make it? Guy, right? It
was weird too, as the Darrell was so thin, and his son's like he's just big and thick.
How did that happen?
Yeah, throws me off.
That boy.
Well, we'll kind of start to wrap up. I just got a couple other things I want to touch on with you, if we can, on this. Sure. Inside linebacker, if we can't sign Ernest Jones, is Demetrius Knight potentially an answer for you in the 2nd round as a guy that could fill in?
Yeah, he's the guy that stood out. He's a guy that I noticed day one and had to do a little bit of a dive on because I wasn't familiar with him. But I thought, wait a minute, in an era where all these inside linebackers are coming out of college at 220 and we have to try and project them as Mikes Guys like Jack Kaiser, I think, is a great example of a guy who played Mike linebacker at Notre Dame. And, he's got a lot of upside. He's 220 pounds. That's kind of hard to get over. If you're going to be wearing the green dot and trying to come up and run support. But Demetrius Knight stood out. He's 6'1", 245, but he moves like the very first day, just watching him turn his hips in coverage drills, moves like a 220 pounder, really fluid, can come off the edge too, though, physical. And he's one of those few guys that are out there that he can be a thumper in the run game and come up and shed and stack and all those things you want. And so, two of those big major mock drafts that came out today actually had Jihad Campbell going to the Seahawks in the first round, which I think could be an odd fit unless something happens in the negotiations and Jones doesn't come back.
Yeah.
If you move on from him, then I think it does become a need. And at least if that happens, just to prepare the fan base, there are some options. Campbell's a good option. He fits that mold too. I think he's 240. And
this is my number one. For me, it's Campbell 1 and Knight 2 right now in the second round.
I was really impressed with Knight. Yeah. And I think he would absolutely fit. We've seen Mike McDonald use a little bit of 3 linebacker stuff too. Like, hey, if he's top of their board in the second round, I don't think even if Jones comes back, it would stop them necessarily from taking him if they stick to their BPA mantra.
Can you sell me on Bassa?
Yeah, as a weak side guy that can cover, and as a leader, he's a guy that's played Mike, and so he's been the green dot guy, and he's called plays. He was doing that this week. He was very, very energetic. He's come straight out of the lab, like rocked up. I saw one quote from an NFL scout who said he looks like he's already been in our weight room for 2 years.
He carries that 230. He's listed 2. That's the thing I want to ask you too. They say 235, and you watch the tape on Oregon, you're like, man, that guy he's 220. He's got to be 220. But then you go, maybe he's just built that efficiently.
Yeah, and maybe he shed some of that. So he weighed in Mobile at 226.
So there we go. My eyes didn't lie to me. No, he didn't shed. He's just they missed him on the deal.
Yeah, as a third linebacker, I mean, right now you're talking about Drake Thomas, right? And give me, I like Drake, but give me Jeffrey Bassa over Drake Thomas. He's 3 inches taller, and he can really get sideline to sideline, and just one of those dudes too. When you talk to him, he's going to win the interview circuit, and he's going to be a guy that you want in your locker room. I think that's going to elevate him on some draft boards. Yeah, as a weak side guy, absolutely.
We got to keep him at will though. We got to keep him. He's not taking on pullers and climbers at the mic. Like he's got to be at will and to be allowed to just run around, right?
Yeah,
because I see him getting caught a lot on blocks.
Yeah, right.
Okay. I'm going to give you a couple of names here, and I want you to tell me who in the second round you take of these names. Because what we have in this draft to me is, see if you're in a similar place. Like I got 12, 13 guys from the first to the second round with around in that area grades, and guys kind of on that line that could or could not be depending on what your flavor is and what you have a like. If you have an option in the second round between Kyle Kennard, Nick Skirton, Jack Sawyer, and Shamar Stewart, who do you take of those 4?
Until you gave me Stewart, I would have said Sawyer.
Okay.
Just because I think Jack Sawyer, and I got a lot of grief the other day for posting a mock while I was on the airplane where I had the Seahawks trading back into the mid-20s and taking Sawyer at like 26. He's not twitchy enough. He's not, which you're always going to hear about white guys playing defensive end, right? They're Trey Hendrickson, but they're not, Sawyer's a culture builder. I think he's one of those guys that you just absolutely want. I could see him going at the top of the set to one of these teams that really needs it, a Carolina, a Jacksonville, right? That a guy to come in and do everything right and high motor and loves football and attacks it. And I think he's more of a playmaker off the edge than he gets credit for, and he can certainly hold the edge too. But until you said Stewart, I'm like, Shamar Stewart, Tuesday, Wednesday was the best player he was the best player in Mobile. The question on him is, okay, then why does he only have a sack and a half the last 2 years at Texas A&M? Well, you can say that about all those Texas A&M guys. Shamar Turner only had 1 sack last year, and Scorton had 4, I think. Is that a scheme thing? Is that just, rotation? I don't know the snap counts down there, but that was the question. And the thing that scouts wanted to see is like, he checked in at 6'5", 281, and the movement skills and the athleticism is undeniable. Where's the production? He was a problem for anyone who tried to block him Tuesday and Wednesday down here. The intensity, the motor, the mindset, like he speaks in terms of wanting to be one of the best defensive ends in the league. And I think his length is something the Seahawks lack. He touched on that earlier. If he somehow falls to the second round, and the only reason I could see him doing that is if teams just can't get past the lack of production on the stat sheet, I'm sprinting to the podium.
Do you have any worries about the tweener aspect that may exist with him, though? Because I think some of the lack, there's no doubting the power edge stuff, and there's no doubting what he will be a monster for you in the run game off the edge. Nobody's moving this guy. Right. But when it comes to him as being able to rush the passer off the edge at that weight, good year he's down at 280. I think he probably played around 290-ish last year. We've seen a lot of these guys where this is – I feel bad for these guys at times where I'm like, really what should happen with you guys? Maybe you should have just been kicked to 3-tech from the jump and allowed to rip and roar out of there. But maybe I'd be wrong on this too, Dan. Maybe I'm wrong on this where he absolutely is going to be one of those rarefied air guys that at 280 can actually operate and be effective off the edge.
Yeah,
specifically.
We saw Mike Morris try to do that at the combine, right? He got down to 270 something, and it didn't help him.
No.
Explosive. I saw that pass rush upside down in Mobile. Like he's got some tools in the toolkit, and I think there's a lot upside there to unlock. With he's got a spin move, and I saw him beat some guys to the edge in the one-on-one drills. I saw him beat Ursery once, just by being sudden. I think that's there. I think he's a guy that's just it hasn't been either wasn't utilized properly in what they were doing at A&M, or he's just now kind of developing. I don't know what his age is off the top of my head, but I think he's one of those younger guys in the class.
I agree. I think he's.
I think
I've got it actually right here. I think
you draft that dude on traits and you take a shot, because I think of those names that you mentioned, the upside is the bigger play there.
Yeah, he is 21. November turns 22, so still a very young kid, and he's very intriguing. He's so unusual, and the talent is there with him. You can see it on tape too. Even though the person's not there, I like him.
Of those four guys you mentioned, I think we know how Mike McDonald likes to drop his guys into coverage, even Leonard Williams at times, famously in New York. I think of those four, he would be the most adept at too.
And what you can do to it is, even if you want to early down him initially and Derek Hall it, so you protect Derek on some of his rundown snaps. He comes out there and early downs, Derek comes out as the pass rusher on late downs. You could kind of rotate that in a little initially and then develop him more 3 down if you had to just get some production from him from the rip. All right, promise last couple questions here with you. Give me 3 guys you absolutely would love to see our Hawks in various values, not the top guys, but just guys you may have an affinity for coming off the Senior Bowl. Man, if we can get these 3 guys on this roster, and 3 guys you don't want any part of.
Ooh, okay. Well, 3 guys that I absolutely, under any circumstances, would want on the roster. Gray Zabel is number 1. Like, he's the dude. He's that guy. And are we talking Senior Bowl only or draft wide?
Let's go just Senior Bowl centric on this one.
Okay, because I would have said Tyler Booker, because he'd be such a perfect fit for what they need at left guard there. And now you're hearing things about him being talked about in terms of like Will Anderson level, like culture building, locker room guy, like does everything right, does everything at 100 miles an hour, everything you want out of a player, smart, tough, dependable, all those Seahawk traits, right? Which, by the way, do you notice now everyone uses that phrase? Every single scouting director, GM, what kind of players? Smart, tough, dependable. I don't know if Schneider was the first one to say those words, but now everyone is.
I think too, though, we're running into that thing where these players are coming out, and it's not like before where they're still a prove it thing once they get to the NFL. They've made their millions now. And so now that built-in work ethic to still be able to, you've already gotten paid, you're already comfortable. Do you have that engine to still get this done? Are you out there just kind of enjoying yourself, or are you all in as a player? Because I think there's a lot of these players that are just kind of, enjoy being a pro and like being a football player versus really having the difference of that versus being nose to the grindstone. I'm here and I want to be great. I want to be my best.
Yeah. The other names that still talking about guys that under any circumstances I would absolutely want on this roster. Darius Alexander. We hadn't talked about Toledo, defensive tackle. He was almost unblockable just about every day down there, 6'5", 310. Not a true nose tackle that we want to find, but just a guy that you figure out a place to play him on that defensive line, and he elevates what you do. He's one of the, so who do I have so far? Zabel, Alexander, Femi Oladejo is another guy that I came away from that week. Like you hear Schneider talk in terms of like, we wanted to come out of the draft with that guy.
Yeah.
That doesn't always work out, because I remember one year Joey Hunt was that guy, right? But yeah, Femi Oladejo is a guy that just moved from off-ball linebacker to edge this last year at UCLA, and I think that's going to unlock like he's the guy that you want getting off the bus first, right? You hear that in terms of that, just like physically, he looks like he's taking to edge in a way that I think the sky's the limit in what's ahead of him. And then let me see if I can come up with one more at a position that we haven't really talked about yet. Jaden Higgins. Give me Jaden Higgins in the second round all day long. You talked about the need for an X receiver and a guy to complement JSN and DK, and be prepared for, when DK is not here anymore at some point. He's a guy that's 6'4", but moves like a 6'1", 6-foot receiver, really smooth route running, catches everything, just kept making plays, and a guy that even when you're not looking at him, you just notice him. He just looks really smooth and natural, and I think would be able to contribute early. Like, he seems advanced in that way. So that's another one that I would throw out there. And then as far as guys to avoid, Walker from Kentucky is one, and we've talked about him already. Like, I don't believe in it. I just don't think the performance matches the size and the length, right? And it's not, if it was a better, like, what was Tavondre Sweat? What did he weigh in at last year? About the same, kind of a similar weight and height, but he's built like it. Like, he's got a base.
He had a little more too,
right?
Nose tackle.
He can beat you with his lower half.
He gave you more nose tackle reps in Texas too. Like, Deion's, there's no good nose tackle reps on Deion's tape, really, which it should be. He can't be. He's not that good enough. Yeah, he's not good enough as a 3 tech to just live in that place. He's got to be a between guy, and I just didn't see any willingness to take on double teams with any ferocious. He doesn't have any of that heart or fire. Where's the fire?
Yeah.
He's big. He's got the size, but just not that.
Yeah. And then I'm having a hard time finding other non-quarterbacks to list this way, just because I was so impressed by so many guys that I saw down there. Maybe Wyatt Black kind of fits in that category too, just because you can get so enticed by the length and the size, but I just didn't really see the production to match it. He kind of screams bust to me. Obviously, bust is relative to where a guy's drafted. But then I'll finish with this, and I know I touched on this at the beginning, but I don't want any part of Jalen Milroe. I still think there's a high potential ceiling there. I just want that to be someone else's project.
I do too. I don't want to wait that thing out. It's going to take a long time to get him wherever he's going to go, if he ever gets there, which I think is unlikely. And I think that there's just, you throw a 5-yard in cutting route at the feet of the guy with a clean pocket. I just go, what are we doing here? Yep. Like, you can't even walk, and I'm much less get to run. So, couple donations here to finish up. For Greens Farm says, my mistake. His name is Max Breedson from Michigan, the fullback. This is the guy I wanted to talk about.
A fullback at Michigan. I mean, that makes sense.
Yeah, it definitely makes sense that they'd be using that.
The last time I got excited about a fullback was, oh my gosh, and now I'm blanking on his name. 2008 or 9, the West Virginia kid.
Owen Schmidt
that banged his helmet on his forehead when he came out. I was managing a sports bar back in the day, and he was a day 3 pick. And so it was Sunday. I just opened the place. I was in there all by myself watching the draft. And I loved Owen Schmidt so much and thought he was going to be such a fit, because that was Holmgren, right? And
on the fullbacks, yeah.
So I used a fullback, right? And they drafted him, and I like screamed out loud. I was so excited about that.
I liked him a lot too. He had great college tape.
Yeah,
I mean, he didn't. Remember his nickname?
I don't.
The beer truck.
The beer truck.
That was
I thought Owen Schmidt was going to be perfect for that Mike Holmgren offense, and just didn't work out that way.
It didn't. No, it didn't.
It
was a hell of a moment where he did. That was a hell of a moment where he banged his helmet though, and his blood's just pouring down his face, and he's saying, "I'm sorry, my bad." He didn't mean to do that. My bad. But I don't know a lot about Max either on that Greens farm. I'll take a check back with me on maybe the next stream, and I'll see if I can take a look at him and see what he brings. I was looking at his stats. Doesn't look like he's gotten a carry at any point in time there with the team. Just receiving stats right now. 5 catches this last year, but 78 yards. So he made something with it. 6'2",
well, and a guy like that's not going to be drafted. He'll be available in undrafted free agency. And if you run a scheme that actually employs a fullback, you're going to, from a recruiting standpoint, right? If you're trying to get one of those guys to sign with you in undrafted free agency, like I think we'd be near the front of the line. Not many teams are willing to employ a guy like that anymore. Agreed. So an interesting guy to track, and definitely something in this offense we're going to need. Greens farm. They're going to find some fullback. We're not taking the fullback snaps out of this playbook next year. Watching some of the same snaps last year, it was a heavy amount of what they used, including I formation looks. Dan, you're going to get some I formation. I'm talking about Holmgren days. We're going back to the I formation, man. And some 2-back stuff. I mean, I've talked about this on the show this morning. I've been all the way back to I always wanted Carson and Penny to be on the field at the same time. Yeah. Even though, in that particular circumstance, it was hard to get them both healthy at the same time, but wanted to see him employed that way. Wanted more Walker and Charbonnet together. Shane Waldron just was allergic to that idea. We saw some of it as the year went on last year, I think, when both those guys were healthy. I think when you have 2 really good backs like that, forget about the fullback idea, but just Charbonnet and Walker and what they can present to a defense. Find a way to get those guys on the field at the same time. I think that really is really going to stress a defense. I really agree with you. And I think with Charbonnet, he's at his best just getting downhill into the hole. And if you put him in a fullback place where you're going 2 steps to the hole, I think that's best for him. Don't have him where you maximize him getting to that spot as quick as possible. They have this play they run with the Saints that I love because everything's off outside zone. And so they mix a lot off the outside zone from the screen game to coming back the other way. But one thing that they did that I really do love is you have the wide receiver running motion prior to the snap. So defensive eyes go to the receiver running motion. And I think that a lot of times they use that as the lead fullback on the play. So you have a 2-man backfield with the receiver going this way. Then you make it look like outside zone going back the opposite way. But then you come back to the fullback on an inside dive. So it starts the fullback, the running back's going totally outside on the stretch. Like all the linemen are moving lateral in the way they look post snap with their first step, but then it all goes back to Charbonnet, and it's almost indefensible. And you saw the Saints use it on 3rd and shorts a lot of times. Where do you want to go? You go to the receiver, you go to the running back, you go to the fullback. Yeah. Take your pick. The most frustrating thing about what ended up happening with Ryan Grubb is, what's the name of the game on offense in the modern NFL? You just touched on it. It's disguise and deception. It's making the same thing look different and different things look the same. And we just didn't get that from Ryan Grubb. 3-4 games into the season, we had guys like Griffin Sturgeon who had already caught on to the fact that with the lack of play action, when they would go to play action, they would always fake to something they never ran to begin with. And defense catch on to that stuff. And so all the things I hear about Kubiak and how he runs that system the way it's meant to be run with concepts like you just described is I can't wait to see it. Well, you mentioned also about the fact that, so much of what the problem with our offensive line was set up by Grubb in the play calling, the 7-step drops, the not getting the ball in hands, the misdirection, like the predictability of it. I think it's a great point because you are on the other side of it with Kubiak, which what you do notice with him is that rather than the Hawks tape where the defenders always seemingly are taking the step last year to where the play is going, you see a tentativeness on the defenses that are playing the Saints last year and how much they're sometimes taking the wrong step to the wrong place, or at the very least they're on their heels rather than their toes post snap. And it can make all the difference in helping those guys out, giving them that little half beat extra time to get themselves right and set, in the right position there on the play. Yeah. Greens Farm, thank you for the $5 donation. He's got a great compliment for Dan, and I got to echo this. He says, this guy seems to do all the behind the scenes stuff that makes a difference. And Greens Farm is absolutely right. Thank you for all your donos today, Greens Farm. But I love the work Dan does. And by the way, folks, I haven't said this. I should have said this at the rip, Dan. I always forget about this. But down in the description link section below right now in this video, you will see a link directly to Dan's channel here, Seahawks Forever on YouTube. So do me this favor, just click directly in that link
It'll take you to his channel, sub on up. He's been kind enough to give us a couple hours. He comes here a bunch over on the channel on our side of it. It's free to go over there and subscribe to his side. So if you're not subscribed, do get subscribed. He's growing. He's out there at the Senior Bowl here this week. He's putting in that hard work. Let's reward him on these efforts. Let's reward him for coming on in here for a couple hours, taking his time out as he has today. I really do appreciate it. But do get subbed up there on that description if you can. And I agree with him, man. You put in your work on this. I laud you on it. It's not easy to go through all those names and do it on it. Like I'm 150 in on my scouting list, and my eyes are just about to start to do the cross-eyed thing as I'm like, man, I'm only halfway here. I'm halfway here. Oh God.
I appreciate the kind words from you and Green's Farm. That means a lot to me. And it's the biggest value to me of being able to actually be down there for the last week is exactly what you're talking about. Like trying to absorb and process all of the names, let alone, do a deep enough dive on them all so you're familiar with their game and can talk to them, at any level really is so much easier when you get to see them for yourself. And, like as someone up until this point hasn't, had the luxury of being able to do this all day, every day, because I have other things that take my attention. I felt like I wasn't where I wanted to be going into the Senior Bowl as far as being familiar with these guys. When I first got approved for credentials, I thought between now and the time I go there, I'm going to watch film of all 130 guys. So that by the time I get down there, I couldn't do that. But now, and I'll tell you from another angle too, it's impossible while you're down there to look at them all as closely as you want to too. I still came back and there were some guys that either just didn't come into my view or didn't do much while I was watching them. And then afterwards, like the kid from Texas, the edge Baron, or Baron Sorrell. He's a guy that just throughout the week, he didn't flash for me. And I didn't make it a point to watch him because there were so many other guys to watch in that group. And then at the end of the week, his own teammates named him. They all select a bunch of awards on Friday, and they named him like the top edge from that team. And I thought, okay, well, now I need to go back and watch more of him. But probably 2/3 of the other guys, I can sit here and talk about with some familiarity just because I got to see it with my own eyes. And that's just a rare treat.
Yeah. And I'm gonna try to get down there with you next year. So I'm making a goal of it right now. I should be able to get it good. So if you're looking for the partner, we'll get this rolling next year, and
that would be awesome.
We'll
I think Bryce Coots is talking about trying to get down there next year, and so it'd be cool to have a group where we could sit together and kind of break it all down. Like we saw that, like the PFF guys are all down there. The 33rd team, those guys are down there, and they actually make room for those guys in the stadium where you can have a place to set up and record right there at the stadium if you bring people with you. So let's make it happen.
Let's make it happen, man. I'm a hard commit right now. I can do it. We'll set aside on that.
There you go.
Phoebe Morcia, thank you for the $2 donation. Says Nolan Smith barely got any sacks in college. Now look. Georgia's got a kind of interesting program, don't they? A little bit. It's why I'm actually really high on a guy that a lot of guys aren't as high on in this draft as far as edge goes. For some of the other edges, like a James Pierce or Mike Green, I like as my number 2 edge Michael Williams, in part, kind of for some of this reason coming out of that Georgia program. What do you think on that?
Yeah.
Are you Michael Williams fan?
He wasn't there, and so I'm a little bit behind on him and some of the top guys. Like I didn't watch a lot of film on those guys, the guys that I knew weren't going to be in the All-Star circuit, because I figured I could catch up on them later, and plus I don't have to worry about where he's going to go in the draft. He's a guy that certainly has a lot of appeal in that edge group, but he's a little bit different than the guys that we saw in Mobile. He's not that 290 pounder, right? He's not an edge setter. He's more of that explosive, dynamic guy that is he going to give you more juice than what you have in Mafe and Nwosu? Like I've mocked him to the Seahawks a few times. I could see them having him pretty high on their board, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it's a question that's a valid one to ask about any of these guys that come from big programs, is when you're surrounded by other great players. Sometimes the trade-off is you get a chance to win, and you get a chance to win a lot, maybe a national championship, but also you're not always going to be in the spotlight. And I think that Texas A&M group is a good example of that. The Ole Miss group, my goodness, there were 3 guys down there. There was Prince Uman Milan, Princely Human Milan, Jared Ivey, and Walter Nolan. And at times there were some of the team periods where all three of those guys are on the line together. Well, none of those guys are going to really stand out, put up the huge sack numbers that a Mike Green was able to get at Marshall, because it's being spread out among them, right? And so that's certainly the case with Georgia. Smile Mondon, I thought, had a really good week, inside linebacker from Georgia.
He's fun.
But a guy that like doesn't have a name, doesn't have a lot of name cachet or recognition among fans, because there's just so many other guys attracting attention down there and making plays.
Well, and the Georgia, their defensive scheme they run is a lot of simulated stack pressure. They're not here's our four dog 5-star recruits, go rush the passer, and everybody drops in coverage. They're going to bring games. And this, like, remember Trayvon Walker went number 1 overall. And where's his production? Jalen Carter, where's his production? Nolan Smith, where's his production? Like, you see this as a commonality with these Georgia players, specifically, partly for the reasons you said, but also because of when you're blitzing and running a stack front, and saw this with Jalen Carter a lot. I have a job to do on this play. I'm to take up 2 blockers. I'm to slant out here to the edge to draw these guys in over here. And so it's very much at that point, you got to kind of hold that production, especially with that particular team and that particular defense, in a different place, because they aren't just allowed to go and run free and just get to the quarterback by any means necessary. It's like, no, you're kind of in a box a little bit there as a defender, and it works for them, but it also makes it damn hard to evaluate these guys coming out.
Yeah. But that's the teams that kill it in the draft every year are the guys that find those players where, on draft day, you think, wait a minute, huh? He had a sack and a half.
Mm-hmm.
But they can play.
Well, that's the tough part with that too. Is it Trayvon Walker? He's been all right. Jalen Carter's been really good. And you go, well, there's some of these guys are, Nolan really good on that side, but a Channing Tindall that came out, like, yeah, some of the guys, there is a little bit of that variance you get on some of these Georgia players too with it, which makes it even harder with it on doing a little bit of that. Yeah. Dogzilla says you need to get a green picks. Thanks for the $2 donation. Dogzilla says you got to get green picks on that axe in the background, man. We got to get a nice, I agree with him on this. You got to get like a neon, maybe even put a little bit of like the lighting on it on the pick coming off the guitar. That looked pretty cool.
It's an inside thing with Dogzilla and I appreciate his persistence. And look, as soon as we're done here, I'll hop on Amazon and just get it done, because he deserves it. Yeah,
I'm gonna send him one, Dogzilla.
Big supporter. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Dogzilla, and you guys all very, very much. Thank you guys all for the donations today. My last question on this one today, and I appreciate you taking so much time. I mean, I know you're running on fumes right now, just getting back yesterday from the Senior Bowl, Dan. So thank you so much for doing this. I really appreciate it. I know you had one eye. You were like the lizards, those little Galapagos lizards that can do the, eyes in different directions. So I know you had one eye over on the prospect, and then you had one eye over there on John Schneider.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me some of the spy techniques you were using on John. Tell me some of what you just read the tea leaves on this one. Just tell me we're going to get this offensive line fixed by how intense he was. Like that picture we all saw. Where, he's on his knees and he was like basically in the ass of the defensive lineman. That's how close he was on his assessment.
Yeah, it's so funny. It was almost like I think I made an observation on Wednesday that it was hard to find him a lot of the times, because you talk about where's Waldo. Well, Waldo was wearing like a red and white striped shirt. All coaches and scouts dress the same. They all go to the same store. They wear the same color. It's all blues and grays. They all have black hair. Most of them wear hats. Like, it was really tough, even with my, binoculars, to find these guys. And actually on Tuesday, I had seen it online first. I think Brian Nemhauser, who was also down there, I got to say hi to him. He pointed him out first and posted a picture, and it was McDonald and Schneider standing side by side. And it was almost like Schneider was trying to be incognito. Like, it was a beautiful day, 70 degrees out there. Most of these guys are in shorts and polo shirts or t-shirts. And he's wearing like these baggy, like cargo pants and this Seahawk, like long sleeve pullover that seemed like it was 2 sizes too big. And his Seahawk hat, he had it pulled down real tight, and his sunglasses on. And he spent most of the day like this, right? He was there Tuesday and then Wednesday, and then he ducked out. McDonald stayed through Thursday. I saw him up close, really paying attention, especially to the defensive drills. But fans are going to like this. Tuesday, every single time that I watched him in both the national team practice in the morning and the American team practice in the afternoon. That whole day anyway, he spent the entire day watching offensive linemen. He was down watching the 1v1s, the individual stuff, the shell stuff, and then, obviously teams stopped looking for him. But every time the position groups were all broken out doing their own stuff for Tuesday anyway, that's where his focus was. Now,
Fantastic.
We've known John likes to be kind of a master of deception, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Maybe he was, sometimes he hides his intentions, sometimes he doesn't. He certainly didn't try to hide in Wyoming when he went to watch Josh Allen's pro day, got him in trouble with Mark Rodgers, right? But that's where his focus was on Tuesday, the whole day. From what I saw, individual work, he was watching the offensive line group.
That's great news. I mean, that's what we all would hope on this. I mean, it doesn't guarantee, like you say, it's going to draft, but it's better than him ignoring it and being over with looking at the edges all week,
Right.
or at the wide receivers all week. And so that's good to hear.
Right? If he had been like watching the running backs the whole week, you'd be like, come on.
Oh yeah. You go, oh, he's still not learning. So, I mean, it's at least a step in the right direction is all I'm saying. It doesn't guarantee we're taking linemen in this draft or spending money, but hey, at least it's a step in the right direction there.
And hey, for people that are just, understandably cynical because of his track record when it comes to offensive line investment, right? I would say this. I think now more so than before, he has a head coach that's going to demand it. Like Mike McDonald's going to be looking over his shoulder the whole offseason going, for me to get this team where I want to get it to and play the kind of football I want to play. And he just talked about it again in the statement he released today. Like, he's going to demand it. John, we have to be physical on offense. We have to be able to protect the quarterback, and we have to be able to dictate terms in the running game when we need to, even when the other team is expecting us to run the football. That's the kind of football we need to play. We have to fix this. I would say that has to have an impact, right? Because we've seen it. We saw McDonald do this with the inside linebackers, and how quickly, how swiftly, and how decisively did John Schneider go out and make those moves to improve that within the season. Now they get the whole benefit of an off season. I think it's such a glaring weakness, and it's the one thing more above all others, as you pointed out earlier, it wasn't the only reason that really held us back. I think his head coach is going to be hounding him the whole off season. Like, we got to get this done.
This is where I think John could really benefit from having this young mind of a coach who's seeing things from a different eye perspective, where last year in the draft, for instance, good draft. Byron Murphy's going to be better put at a 3-tech role. Barner gave you some interesting snaps. Best pick of that draft was probably Tyrese Knight.
Yeah.
And by all accounts, what did we know about that draft and that pick was that it seemed to be a McDonald special, where John literally went and said, which one of the ones do you like? And to me, that's like, okay, well, John, you kind of got, when you did this once, it kind of really paid off for you. So if he's here in your again on this, maybe that it could equally pay off. And hopefully that this is the place where he finally changes his ways. I know I said that was the last question. The one guy I did want to ask you about, because I really started to fall in love with this guy as a receiver. I took him in my last mock, Jack Besh.
I feel bad that I haven't brought his name up until this point. And that's a miss on my part, because he's a guy that, he was the best wide receiver down there every single day, made plays, made contested catches, much, much more athletic than I expected. And then you hear other scouts and analysts talk about him, and they expect him to be athletic. They expect him to do well at the combine. You're hearing the Puka Nacua comps. I think that comes more from the contested catch stuff than it does from anything else. Loved the way the game ended. I mean, his story, what he's gone through the last month, all the things surrounding his brother and everything else, and to win the game that way, to catch the pass from a Memphis Tiger. His brother's name was Tiger, all that stuff. Besh is a guy that I have begun mocking to them in the second or third round all day long if he's there. I know I name dropped Jaden Higgins earlier as a guy. I would put Besh right there too. I think when you talk about trying to find someone that would be complementary in how he plays the game to what the Seahawks have in JSN and DK, I think he fits right in that mold.
Who are you taking between the two? He had between Higgins and Besh. If they're sitting there both, who are you taking?
Ooh, that's tough, because when you talk about grades, I think Higgins, there's even some first round buzz for him now. I think he's a second rounder. I think Besh might be in a notch below that. Maybe not last week though. I'm gonna I'm going to pass on that.
We're not to draft you. What you're supposed to say, Dan, is I got more evaluation to do. I don't want to do a premature evaluation before I've taken a look at all the
That's what
tape.
I mean. You'd be happy with either one. That's the answer. You'd be happy with either one. You'd be ecstatic with either one. They're not the same player, but man, they both kind of fit in that same category as guys that I think you'd come in immediately be your wide receiver 3. Sorry, Jake Bobo lovers and stands.
No, it's right. It's right. It's right. You got to do this, and you need a Z. And these guys are both guys. I think I'd be happy with both too. I like Jack because I think the contested catch and the yak are the two things that are really needed in this receiving core right now. If DK and Tyler, JSN gave you some of that last year, but I don't think that's necessarily the inherent part of his game that is at the forefront. This guy's got both of those things that he brings, and I think it's kind of like Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua had kind of a baby. You'd get a Jack Besh in certain ways, I think, and how he goes.
And this is a sneaky good wide receiver group. It didn't have sort of the allure or the buzz coming in, just I think because the last 3 or 4 have been so good at the top anyway, the first couple of rounds. But there were guys that had Pat Bryant out of Illinois was really, really good all week and kind of fits that mold too. A lot of 6'1", 6'2" guys down there. I was really impressed with, my Coug brethren, Kyle Williams, I thought had a really good week. Didn't get many opportunities in the game, but he looked really good and helped himself. There's a bunch of slot guys down there. What's that?
Trey Harris
looked good. Some of the smaller slot guys, Tez Johnson had a dynamic week. Jalen Noel had the unfortunate drop in the end zone during the game, but he was great all week. And then Jalen Royals was a guy that I wasn't familiar with before I went down there from Utah State. He has a very unique body type, 6'1", 6'1", but with a strong lower half. I've likened him to a 3-inch taller Golden Tate a little bit. Can really be physical.
That's wild. I think I put the same thing, like Golden Tate body or lower half. He's got that Golden Tate eye thing going on, right?
And when I saw him up close, I thought, well, he's not going to be sudden. He's not going to be dynamic as an athlete. He's too thick. But he's expected to run sub 4.4 in Indy. So he does that. He
takes the top off the defense. I'm buying that. He does. He pulls that top off. Those guys don't do that unless they usually have that 4.4 speed. So I think he can do that. Savion Williams I don't think he was down there at the senior, but he's a weird one, isn't he?
No, he pulled out late. Yeah, he initially had agreed to go and then decided not to. Yeah. But there was another Savion. There was another Savion down there, and I'm glad you brought that up because I wanted to mention his name, and I'm surprised that I didn't. But Savion Jones out of LSU was another one of those edge players who was really, really impressive the whole week, and another guy that I think would fit really, really well with what the Seahawks are doing if they were able to get him.
You're going to find some good edges, and if you don't want to go early, you can go early and find good there, but you can also find good 4, 5, maybe even 6, because these guys are going to be pushed down by how deep that edge group is. You're going to end up having guys land, that may be really good players like that. Savion Jones, if he went in the 4th round or something, wouldn't shock me necessarily with how good they is up the top and ahead of him. Just doesn't mean another draft he might be up a little bit higher, but this one just pushes him down because of that depth. You feel the same way on that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because runs are going to happen, right? You get into the 2nd round, like there's going to be a huge tight end run at a certain point when you get to that 2nd level, right after the first 2 guys. There's going to be a huge running back run at a certain point. I think interior offensive line, there's going to be a run that starts probably on day 2. And so there's so many of those edge guys that I think teams that really, really need one are going to take one early. And I think there's some of those guys that we might be surprised by sort of how far they fall, and it could play right into the Seahawks' hands.
Be great value later on if you want to go that route, and something that could instruct you, maybe don't jump early on for those guys. Go to a place like an offensive line or go to something more tight end if that's when their value is, because you go, hey, we're going to get a guy down here that's not that far off of where this guy is here in the 2nd round. Just kind of on the looks of things to me. I think edge is maybe the deepest pound for pound. Would you say maybe the deepest in this, overall? I know we go offense, but kind of just in general terms, that's probably the deepest to the point of this class, right?
Yep. Really deep. And the drop off isn't as severe as it is with some of the other position groups. Like, there are going to be guys like we've name dropped here. And then there's other guys that aren't in the all-star circuit too, that get pushed down. And I think there's going to be still some really great value on day 3, even with that position group.
Indeed it will. Well, Dan, I want to thank you today for coming up, taking a ton of your time up on this. I know, especially for being as tired as I'm sure you are, coming off a week of hard work and looking at these guys. You did a great job. It sounds like you had your eye right on the right time in all the ways, not just getting copy. You got some great notes on this stuff. Folks, do me this favor. Down in the description link section below, you can click a direct link to Dan's channel, Seahawks Forever Podcast. Please do me the favor as he spent so much of his time here today and going over there and subbing up to his channel. Hit the like button on this video if you can, but do please get subbed up. He's cooking along over there. We're going to definitely have you back on here this off season. Maybe get over on your side too on this some point or another.
Absolutely.
So
yeah, we'll make that happen.
Appreciate you coming on though today, man, taking so much time. I'm sorry to pull so much of your time, but man, I wanted to pick your brain on this. I wanted to try to get out there myself this year, didn't get a chance, but having somebody that had their eyes on it, it's so valuable to have this kind of information and not have to get it necessarily secondhand from sources you're unsure about or what they're looking at or what they're seeing. I know you're seeing it true on that side of it because we probably see it very similar in that way.
Yeah, I appreciate it. It's always good to be on the show with you. And I always love the questions from your viewers because they're really smart and, you are. And so it makes sense that they would watch your channel. And so I always feel like I learned something new when I'm on with you too. So I appreciate that.
Same is true back with you, man. That's part of I loving doing this is there was always something to take away that you don't know coming in, not beyond just the players you saw, on that, just as far as perspective too, and the outlook of this team. And I think there's definitely a bigger discussion we need to be having a little bit about this team on that purgatory state of things that we didn't have a chance to get in today, but we will maybe in that little later time this season get into. I'd like to have a talk with you on that at some point. But Thanks for taking out so much of your time today. You did a great job out there. I'm committing right now to next year for sure, 100%. So we'll line it up. We'll get it planned out far in advance and get that thing set up. And hopefully we can find, we'll go in on the mobile Starlink unit.
Right.
if we got to make that rent one.
At minimum, we just won't stay at a Hilton property.
I guess not, but it's like, man, if Hilton ain't bringing the internet, who is, we're certainly not getting that at the roadway in. I'll tell you that,
Yeah. We'll figure it out. We got a year to figure it out. We'll come up with a solution. Yeah.
Plenty of time on that. Well, Dan will be back over here. It's no time at all on that side of it. Thank you guys today for watching. Appreciate all the donations. I guess we got one more here. Oh my gosh, let's go. Me finishing us off right with $100 donation coming in the house tonight. Nice. You dropped a big dono just last week on that side in that big equal way. Thank you, man, for that monstrous donation. That is an awesome drop on your side of it. Really, really, really appreciated, man. Thank you so much. He says, fan of both of you fellas. God bless and go Hawks. Well, that is
Hawks. I like that. It's a good way to
perfect end. Way. Yeah, you finished this off just right with that perfect way to finish this off. So God bless to you as well. Go Hawks, you guys out there. Dan did a great job on this Senior Bowl coverage. We've got the free agency period coming down, draft after that. This does not stop this offseason, and even though we are in the offseason, but we're going to be cooking on both of our channels on this side all the way through. Thank you, Dan. Thank you to me for the $100 drop to finish this off right. Really appreciate you guys on that. Please, again, do go up and sub up over there to Dan's side, Seahawks Forever Podcast. Click the link in the bottom of the description section. Either way, we will be back soon enough. But until next time, folks, thank you very much for watching. Appreciate me and all of you guys for all the support of the channel. You guys are unbelievable in your support on both of our sides of it. Helped, I know, with Dan on the GoFundMe, getting in the thing. So really thank you to all of you guys for all you guys do for our channels as you guys make us go. Dan's right on the edge of here really cooking and getting this thing on where he's at a full time. And it's that support that lets this happen directly. It is directly that allows this to happen. So thank you to guys for all of you guys doing that. It's really from the bottom of our hearts. I can speak for Dan on this, that it's really appreciated as it allows us to do what we love to do. So thank you. Back soon. Until next time, please, by God, don't you ever forget. Oh, wait, hold on. Dan. Dan. This is on your side, buddy. This is on your side.
What do we got?
You got a $200 donation on your side now from me. Coming in with a $200 donation over onto Dan's channel, picking him up. Let's go. See, that's the way I finish off right here. I love it, me. I
appreciate it. That's incredibly moving. I appreciate that.
Says, here's to you, Dan. Go Hawks. Well, that's nice. And me dropped a couple $100 donation on my channel last week. As I always say, Dan, thanks never seems to be enough on those kind of things for those kind of big donations, but it is something that he tries and look, Dan's out there putting this work in because he wants to do this and be able to do this because this is his passion. He loves to do it. And you guys support him in that. And you've supported me in this endeavor in the same way. And it's not empty talk to say it is what allows us to do what we do. The ad monetization that you get off YouTube is very, very small. There's very, very little money to be had on that type of thing. It's certainly not enough to do this kind of on a full time, but this kind of support that comes in, and number one, it blows us away. but it allows us to get to do what we get to do on this, to chase our dreams in this way. And so you're facilitating that, me, both on my end and over to Dan. And I know it is absolutely appreciated from the bottom of my hearts that you guys do that in that way. So big time donation. Let's go, me. Let's go. See, that's the way to finish this off, Dan. Yeah. Well, Dan's gonna be a busy man. I'm sure he's got some more shows here going on today. But me, you're the superhero today on this channel. Thank you for those double dip donations. Big time coming through on your side of it. Back soon, folks. Mies finishes off right with an exclamation point in a big major way. Both of us will be back soon. But until next time, Seahawks about to kick some ass this offseason and take some names. Get ready for it, folks. We might just be ready to be a contender next year with some of these moves. Hope you are ready. Me and Dan will both be tracking it throughout this offseason.
Let's go.
Stay with us all the way. Let's go. Let's go. Well, thank you guys for watching. Back soon. But please don't you ever forget. God, don't do it. Not when we're ready to cook this thing up. Go Hawks.
Go Hawks.